Chapter 30:23. Demand, haha. Do I have to break through the formation just because you asked me to? Wouldn't that make me lose face? Ma Yujia crossed his arms before his chest and gazed at Situ Liangji in a calm and composed manner, and the disdain and contempt in his eyes were extremely dense. Haha, you said you can break through the formation, yet you refuse to do so now. Your lies are really worthless. Situ Liangji started laughing from extreme anger, and then he gazed at Zhongli Haoyan and said, Haoyan, he's an arrogant person. You should drive him away now. Of course, if you're too embarrassed to make a move, then I can do it. I won't take anyone's life, but you probably won't say anything if I cripple him, right? As he spoke, Situ Liangji walked slowly towards Ma Yujia, and the killing intent in his eyes seemed material and wasn't concealed in the slightest. Who said, I won't break through the formation. I'm just saying that you don't have the qualifications to make me break through the formation. Ma Yujia didn't care about Situ Liangji, who came over aggressively, and he still courted death as he said, How about this? I'll barely join forces with Long, one to break through the formation today. If we're able to break through the formation, then you can just kneel before me and call me and Long when Grandpa, and then kowtow 3 times. How about it? Situ Liangji stopped moving and gazed at Ma Yujia as if he was looking at an idiot, and then he said coldly, Is there even a need to compete? You'll definitely lose. If you lose, then you have to call me Grandpa 3 times and crawl between my legs. Haha, of course. Ma Yujia strode forward arrogantly and arrived by Situ Liangji's side, and then he patted the latter on the shoulder and said earnestly, Be prepared to call me Grandpa. As soon as he finished speaking, the fatty gestured toward Zhuyin and said, Brother Zhua, let's break through the formation together. Zhuyin was slightly speechless, and he said in a low voice, There's no benefit in making him call me Grandpa. I won't do that. As soon as Zhuyin said that, Situ Liangji almost fainted. He thought that this guy was a man of few words, but it was said that his words were even more annoying than this fatty's. Ma Yujia smiled cunningly as if he already knew that Zhuyin would say this. He looked at Zhongli Haoyan and the saintess of the Phoenix people and chuckled. You two should be the leaders of the human and non-human teams respectively, right? Zhongli Haoyan and the Phoenix people saintess looked at Ma Yujia at the same time, their brows furrowed slightly. They didn't know what this fatty was trying to say. What's wrong? Could it be that you have other requests to break the formation? The saintess of the Phoenix people said coldly. Could it be that I'm going to break the formation for free while the 2 of us work ourselves to death to break the formation without any benefits? Ma Yujia said with a faint smile. Zhongli Haoyan was obviously more reasonable than the saintess of the Phoenix people. She said in a low voice, As long as you can really break the formation in a short time, I can fulfill one of your requests. Haha, I like how straightforward you are, unlike some people who are so stingy. They are a disgrace to the non-human race. Ma Yujia said with a hidden meaning. The saintess of the Phoenix people's saintess didn't look too good. She said coldly, If you can really break the formation, I'll do the same thing as Zhongli Haoyan and fulfill one of your requests. However, if you can't break the formation, then don't blame me for holding you accountable. Even if you, Zhongli Haoyan, make a move, I won't let them off easily. Of course. My request is actually very simple. After we break the formation, we want to be the first to enter the altar. Ma Yujia said calmly. You want to be the first to enter? The saintess of the Phoenix people frowned slightly. Zhongli Haoyan didn't look too good either, but she didn't say anything. That's right, we only have one request. If you can fulfill it, then we can immediately begin to break the formation. Of course, we won't be like that Situ something trash who can't even do a good job of scouting the formation. Ma Yujia said calmly. Situ Liangji was furious. This damn fatty's mouth was too vicious. He really wanted to tear his mouth apart. I agree. Zhong Li Haoyan said. I agree too. The saintess of the Phoenix people hesitated for a while, then nodded in agreement. The non-human race couldn't do anything about the formation outside the square. If the formation couldn't be broken, then Gong Gong's body would be nothing more than a mirage. Hee, Brother Long, come and help me. I'll scout the formation first. Ma Yujie revealed a cunning smile. He turned around, waved his right hand, and dozens of formation flags appeared. He began to scout the formation. Zhou finally understood Ma Yujie's goal. It turned out that he wanted to enter the altar first. Although it didn't matter to Zhou whether he entered the altar first or later, entering the altar first would naturally give him an advantage. After all, in addition to the blood essence in Gong Gong's body, there might be other treasures beside it. Everyone knew the principle of first come, first served. Seeing Ma Yujie pretending to take out formation flags to scout the formation, Situ Liangji snorted coldly, but his eyes were fixed on Ma Yujie's movements. However, when he saw Ma Yujie using the method of trapping and killing formations to scout the formation, he couldn't help but laugh loudly and say, Damn fatty, are you crazy? This is obviously a defensive formation. How can you use the method of trapping and killing formations to scout the formation? Are you courting death? Zhong Li Haoyan and the others stared at each other with wide eyes, revealing doubtful expressions. Although they weren't divine array masters, they had some knowledge about formations. The formation on the square was indeed a defensive formation. It didn't look like a trapping or killing formation at all. This fatty actually used the method of trapping and killing formations to scout the formation. Wasn't he going in the wrong direction? Shut up, you idiot. What do you know? Ma Yujie turned his head and scolded Situ Liangji. Then he straightened his posture and continued to scout the formation. Situ Liangji was furious. When he wanted to rush out and attack Ma Yujie, he was stopped by Zhong Li Haoyan. Haoyan, do you believe this damn fatty? This guy doesn't understand formations at all. He keeps slandering me. How can I stand it? Situ Liangji shouted angrily when he saw Zhong Li. Haoyan stopped him. Zhong Li Haoyan shook her head and said in a deep voice, Let's continue watching. Situ Liangji had no choice but to give up. However, when he looked at Ma Yujie, the murderous intent in his eyes became even more intense. Ma Yujie just sneered and ignored Situ Liangji. After 2 hours, Ma Yujie suddenly changed the seal with his hands. The formation flags around him rushed out and turned into many directions, rushing into the formation at the edge of the square. Swoosh! Swoosh! The moment these array flags entered the array, the entire array barrier began to tremble. Soon after, a sharp killing intent surged out from the array. Chapter 30:24. Fatty shows his prowess, long win. Ma Yujie opened his eyes and shouted at Zhou. Zhou nodded and waved his sleeve to summon 9 beast bone array discs. He threw out the array flags and the murderous spirit was suppressed by Zhou's array flags. Ma Yujie took advantage of this opportunity to stand up and take a few steps back. Bang! Zhou also took a few steps back. The murderous spirit burst out and blasted Zhou's 9 beast bone array discs away. At this moment, the array that was originally restrained became violent. The murderous spirit raged like a storm. Zhong Li Haoyan and the others also noticed the sudden appearance of the murderous spirit. Naturally, they retreated and stayed away from the array. Is this really a trap and kill array? Zhong Li Haoyan stared blankly at the formation that had suddenly gone berserk, and she spoke with slight disbelief. Situ Liangji's expression changed drastically. He stared at the array and was so scared that he could not help but step back. But soon, Situ Liangji came back to his senses. His face was extremely gloomy. He looked at Ma Yujie's back and his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. I have said just now that this idiot explored the array in the wrong direction. But this idiot just did not believe me and said that I was slandering him. Ma Yujie let out a long breath and laughed evilly. From time to time, he would glance at Situ Liangji, who was not far away and did not look good. Humph! You have just explored the real array. As for whether you can break this array, it is still unknown. Don't be complacent too early. Although Situ Liangji's skills were not good, he was a genuine divine array master at the Genesis level. He could tell at a glance that the array in front of him was not an ordinary Genesis level array. Moreover, this trap and kill array was an array within an array. It was not that simple. You don't have to worry about it. Ma Yujie shrugged and strode toward the array. At the same time, he took out one array flag after another from his spiritual ring. He actually took out 108 array flags in one go. These array flags were arranged around Ma Yujie's body, like stars revolving around him. Bang! The murderous intent on the surface of the formation was blocked by the 108 formation flags. Brother Joie, I'll help you fend off these murderous intents. Go and find the array base of this formation. As long as you find the array base, we can work together to completely break this formation, said Ma Yujie. Zhuowen knew Ma Yujie's intention. He followed behind Ma Yujie, and at the same time, he used the infinity of primordial chaos to deduce the approximate location of the array and the key points of the array. With Ma Yujie blocking in front, Zhuowen's search for the array base went exceptionally smoothly. In just an hour, he found the array base of the killing array. I've already found the killing array's foundation. Everyone attack this place together. Zhuowen pointed with his right hand, pointing out the position of the array foundation of the array formation, and shouted to Zhongli, Haoyan, and the others, "Let's attack together." Zhong Li and Haoyan hurriedly joined forces with Yi Qidong and the others, attacking together in the direction that Zhuowen had pointed out. The Phoenix People Saintess did not dare to be negligent. She commanded everyone to attack together. Bang! 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 Terrifying attacks blasted out one after another, landing on the position that Zhuowen had pointed out. Immediately, the array shook violently and collapsed. After the formation collapsed, the terrifying murderous intents immediately dissipated. We've already broken the formation, Zhong Li and Haoyan said excitedly. Not yet. We've only broken the killing array. There's still a trapping array within. Zhuowen said calmly and continued to use the infinity of primordial chaos to explore the entire formation. Zhong Li, Haoyan, and the others all calmed down. They also saw that other than the murderous intents dissipating, the barrier had yet to disappear. After several hours, Zhuowen finally made a move and pointed out another direction. Zhong Li, Haoyan, and the others did not dare to be negligent. They all attacked together in that direction. After a while, the last trapping array was completely destroyed. The invisible barrier that had appeared at the edge of the square finally shattered and collapsed. We've finally broken the formation. Zhong Li and Haoyan revealed a trace of an excited smile. Even Yi Qidong, who was serious in speech and manner, revealed a relaxed smile. Ma Yujie also revealed a relaxed expression. He immediately looked at Situ Liangji with a mocking gaze. Situ Liangji also saw Ma Yujie's gaze, and his face turned green. I say, come to Grandpa's side. Kowtow to your grandpa 3 times. Ma Yujie hurriedly waved at Situ Liangji, causing Situ Liangji, who originally wanted to retreat, to change his expression greatly. His eyes were filled with anger. Damn, fatty, aren't you going too far? Have you been playing with me from the beginning? Situ Liangji glared at Ma Yujie, his tone gloomy and terrifying. What, are you going back on your word? Ma Yujie's eyes darkened as he said, casually, you were the one who set a trap for me to kneel down to you. Don't even think about it. Situ Liangji sneered. He immediately kicked out and rushed towards Ma Yujie. His right hand formed a palm and blasted towards Ma Yujie's face without hesitation. Situ Liangji's face was ferocious as he said coldly, "Damn fatty, you dare to play with me? You have to pay the price." Ma Yujie's eyes were cold as he said indifferently, "A mere mid-stage god of creation, trash dares to be arrogant in front of me?" As he spoke, Ma Yujie's right palm suddenly blasted out. There was no fluctuation of the power of the heavenly Tao. This guy directly blasted out with his physical body. Zhuowen knew very well that Situ Liangji was finished. Ma Yujie's origin was too mysterious, especially his physical body. Even he was afraid of him. Previously, he had been at a disadvantage when facing this guy head-on with his peak, 5-star, Pengu sacred body. It could be seen that Ma Yujie's physical body was much more terrifying than many alien races. He was definitely not an ordinary person. Crack! Ma Yujie's palm broke, Situ Liangji's right palm. Then, he suddenly raised his left hand and ruthlessly slapped Situ Liangji's face. The poor Situ Liangji was directly stunned by this palm. He was sent flying and smashed into the ground, twitching continuously. Ma Yujie strode in front of Situ Liangji and grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to kneel in front of him. "It's time for you to keep your promise. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Ma Yujie's eyes were filled with killing intent. Situ Liangji was frightened and trembled. He hurriedly kowtowed 3 times to Ma Yujie and called him grandpa without any integrity. "That's more like it. Come here and kowtow 3 times to your other grandpa." Ma Yujie's expression softened as he pointed at Zhuowen and said to Situ Liangji. Situ Liangji didn't dare to resist Ma Yujie. He kowtowed 3 times to Zhuowen and called him grandpa at the same time. Zhongli Haoyan stood in place and didn't say anything to stop him. Instead, she looked at Ma Yujie with her beautiful eyes. Although this fatty didn't look very reliable, his strength surprised her. Situ Liangji was the strongest genius of the Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower. He was a mid-stage Genesis lord. However, he was defeated by this fatty in one move. Moreover, this fatty defeated Situ Liangji with his physical strength. This made Zhongli Haoyan even more afraid of this fatty. Not only Zhongli Haoyan, but the others also revealed a surprised expression. They didn't expect this fatty to be so powerful. Chapter 30:25. Sorcerer Gods. Alter Zhongli Haoyan gazed deeply at Ma Yujie. She had truly underestimated this guy. She hadn't expected him to be so powerful. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing exchanged a glance. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. Yao Xiangjuan wasn't too surprised. When she had teamed up with Ma Yujie before, they had encountered a creator-level mutated beast. Ma Yujie had helped her escape from that beast, so she knew that Ma Yujie was powerful. He wasn't any weaker than Zhuowen. Jiang Qixing, on the other hand, was truly shocked. He had always thought that this fatty was just a playboy. He hadn't expected him to be a powerful character. As for why this fatty had become Long Wen's friend, he thought it was more likely a coincidence. Now that Ma Yujie had displayed his powerful array Dao skills and terrifying strength, Jiang Qixing finally understood why Ma Yujie had become friends with someone as ruthless as Longwen. They had become friends because their skills were similar. Of course, the friend that Jiang Qixing thought of was Zhuowen's was in quotation marks. Ma Yujie always claimed to be his best friend, but at the most critical moment, he was the one who had screwed him over the most. "Both of you are our creation-level god formation masters." The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix, people couldn't help but ask when her beautiful eyes landed on Ma Yujie and Zhuowen. He, of course. "We're not just any Genesis divine array masters. We're much stronger than some trash." Ma Yujie said proudly, "Brother Long, the 2 of us broke this array. Let's go in first. Just follow behind me." Ma Yujie said casually. He put his arm around Zhuowen's shoulder and entered the plaza ahead of everyone else. The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people frowned slightly, but she didn't say anything. She just followed behind silently. Zhongli Haoyan, on the other hand, was calm and composed. She led the human team and followed closely behind. This damn fatty is really arrogant, and that Longwen, he killed many of our mutated beasts. How dare these two walk in front of us? Holy Maiden, are we just going to let them do as they please? Moses came to the Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people and secretly transmitted his voice to her. The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people's expression didn't change. She replied indifferently, "They won't be able to jump around for long. We're just in case. Let's get close to Gongong's body first." Gongong was one of the 12 ancestors. His body is earth-shattering, and even after his death, his body can't be broken through with ordinary methods. The humans' understanding of the ancestors' divine array. They know nothing about extracting blood's blood essence. So what if Long Wen and Ma Yujie entered the altar first? They are also helpless, aren't they? After we enter the altar, the first thing we will do is to extract Gongong's spirit blood as soon as possible. Once we do that, it will be time to deal with these human beings. Moses's eyes lit up and he hurriedly bowed. In the end, he praised the Holy Maiden for being astute and wise. Everyone came to the front of the altar. Looking at the huge ring-shaped altar high above, everyone felt small and insignificant. "Thank you so much, young sister." Ma Yujie laughed mischievously. He ignored Zhong Li and Haoyan's pretty face, which had darkened because of this form of address, and ascended the altar with Zhuowen. On the stairs, Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie with slight bewilderment and sent a voice transmission. "Brother Ma, the order of entering the altar doesn't seem to affect us, right? Why did you raise such an unnecessary request?" Ma Yujie smiled and said, "Brother Long, you may not have seen this kind of altar, but I've seen many of them before. This altar is called the altar of the god of sorcerer. It's used to store powerful creatures. This altar can only be entered 3 times, and only 2 people can enter each time. The interval between each entry is 3 days. If we don't ask to enter the altar first, I'm afraid it won't be easy for us to enter it. Also, don't worry. The altar of the god of sorcerer is something from ancient times. In this era, those who know about it are almost extinct. Be it Zhongli Haoyan or the Phoenix People Saintess, they know nothing about the altar of the god of sorcerer." Zhuo Wen's eyes narrowed. He finally understood why Ma Yujie had made such a request. So it was because of this. Of course, Zhuo Wen was even more afraid of Ma Yujie. This guy even knew about the altar of the god of sorcerer. What kind of background did he have? Zhuo Wen and Ma Yujie took the lead and entered the top of the altar. At the top of the altar, there were bone flags. These bone flags fluttered in the wind and emitted a decaying aura. "Let's go. Follow me to the center of the altar," Ma Yujie suddenly said and hurriedly entered the center of the altar. At the center, surrounded by the bone flags, there was an exquisite magic array. When the 2 of them entered the magic array, a teleportation force spread out. Zhuo Wen's vision darkened, and the 2 of them disappeared from the altar. When Zhuo Wen opened his eyes, he found that he was no longer on the altar. Instead, he was in the air above the altar, where Gongong's body was stored. After Ma Yujie and Zhuo Wen were completely teleported away by the magic array, Zhongli Haoyan and the Phoenix People Saintess arrived at the top of the altar. They naturally noticed that Zhuo Wen and Ma Yujie had disappeared from the magic array. This altar really allows us to enter the place where Gongong's body is stored. The Phoenix People's Saintess' beautiful eyes lit up. Although she knew that Gongong's body was in the air, they had already tried. It was impossible to fly in the plaza. There was an extremely powerful restriction on the air. They were just like mortals. They could only stand below and look at Gongong's body. With this magic array, it was naturally the best way to enter the air. Because the magic array could only accommodate 2 people at a time, both sides discussed and agreed that the Phoenix People Saintess and Zhongli Haoyan would enter first. However, the moment the 2 of them approached the magic array, they were blocked by a barrier. A sentence appeared above the magic array. "Teleport 3 times, 2 people each time. 3 days apart. Everyone was dumbfounded. They naturally understood the meaning of this sentence. In other words, the teleportation array could only teleport 6 people once every 3 days, and only 2 people at a time. Did that fatty know this would happen? Is that why he made such a request at the beginning? The Phoenix people's saintess expression was ugly. She began to suspect that the fatty already knew the function of the altar. Otherwise, he would not have made such a useless request. Chapter 30:26. Breakthrough to 6 stars only. Hao-Yan nodded and had no objections. She said in a deep voice, "You and I will enter the 2nd time. Brother Yi and Moses will enter the 3rd time. I believe no one has any objections to sending their strongest in. Don't worry if Brother Yi and I are lucky enough to obtain the ancestral witch's blood essence. We won't take it for ourselves. When we come out, we will distribute the blood essence." Zhong Li and Hao-Yan's words were immediately echoed by the others in the team. Some of them were worried that they wouldn't be able to enter the place where Gong Gong's body was kept and would gain nothing. If that happened, wouldn't their efforts be in vain? Zhongli Hao-Yan's words were a warning to them. Everyone expressed their support for Zhongli Hao-Yan's arrangement. The Phoenix People Saintess sneered at Zhongli Hao-Yan and the others. She thought to herself disdainfully, they are just mere humans. How dare they dream of obtaining the ancestral witch's blood essence? The Phoenix People Saintess was confident that these humans didn't have the correct method to extract the ancestral witch's blood essence. She was taught the correct method by the clan leader of the Phoenix People. She even had the corresponding tools. If she could enter the place where Gong Gong's body was stored, she would definitely gain a lot. As for Zhuowen and Ma Yujie, who entered first, she didn't care about them. So what if they stayed beside Gong Gong's body for 3 more days? If they couldn't grasp the method to extract the ancestral witch's blood essence, it would be useless no matter how long they stayed. Haha, we finally found Gong Gong's body. Ma Yujie looked at the huge body in front of him and couldn't help but laugh heartily. His eyes were blazing. Zhuowen raised his head and looked at Gong Gong's body. His eyes suddenly focused, and he summoned his clone from the outside world. What's wrong? Ma Yujie asked in surprise when he saw Zhuowen summon his clone. The Gong Gong parasite in my clone is acting strangely. It seems to be yearning for something. I'll send my clone to Gong Gong's body first. Zhuowen said and jumped onto Gong Gong's body. He went to Gong Gong's chest, and the clone sat down cross-legged. At this moment, a thumb-sized bug was wriggling on the forehead of the clone, letting out a soft hiss. The voice seemed to be yearning for something. Zhuowen soon found out what this Gong Gong goo worm craved. It was actually Gong Gong's spirit blood. Ji Hao's clone's eyes sparkled as he gently pressed his right hand on Gong Gong's chest. Instantly, he found a strong stream of spirit blood surging out of Gong Gong's chest, flowing into his body through his palm. These vital energy and blood continued to circulate in his meridians before finally surging to his Tianling acupoint and being absorbed by the Gong Gong goo worm. Zhuowen's eyes shone brightly. He knew that Gong Gong goo was absorbing the essence blood to strengthen itself. However, during this process, he could absorb part of the essence blood to improve his Pengu's sacred body. He knew that he had reached the final step of fusing with Gong Gong bugs, but he found that his Pengu sacred body showed no sign of breaking through. If the Gong Gong goo worm cooperated with Gong Gong's spirit blood, his Pengu's sacred body might really break through and become a 6-star Pengu sacred body. Thinking of this, Zhuowen hurriedly operated the Pengu sacred body. Zhuowen seized a part of the essence blood that was absorbed from Gong Gong's body and began to refine his body. Ma Yujie watched quietly. He saw that Zhuowen's clone was emitting a crystal clear light. In the crystal clear light, there was a little blood light flashing. He knew that it was Gong Gong's spirit blood. Damn it, this guy is taking advantage of me. After this guy breaks through, I must ask him to get me more spirit blood. Ma Yujie complained. At the same time, he looked at Zhuowen with some fear. Since he knew that Zhuowen cultivated the Panga's sacred body, he knew that this guy's future achievements would not be low. However, he was also worried. He knew more secrets than other cultivators, and he knew how Panga died. Since Zhuowen had inherited Panga's legacy and cultivated the Pangu's sacred body, he would definitely be targeted by heaven in the future. Maybe he would follow in Panga's footsteps in the future. Damn it! Why should I worry about this guy? I can't even protect myself. I've been trapped in this world for so many years. Instead of worrying about this guy, I'd better worry about myself. Ma Yujie shook his head and said helplessly. Time gradually passed, and soon 2 days had passed. During these 2 days, Ma Yujie saw that Zhuowen's clone's momentum was getting stronger and more terrifying. Even the clone's body became more crystal clear, without any impurities. It looked very clean. At the same time, Ma Yujie's eyes fell on Gonggong's body under his feet. The corners of his mouth kept twitching. Gonggong's body now looked a little thin, much thinner than when they first entered this place. Ma Yujie knew that it was because Zhuowen had absorbed too much of Gonggong's spirit blood. This guy still hasn't broken through. Gonggong's spirit blood is going to be absorbed by this guy, isn't it? Ma Yujie looked anxious, but he didn't dare to disturb Zhuowen's cultivation. After all, Ma Yujie didn't know how to extract the spirit blood of Gonggong. After all, the body of Gonggong was way too strong, and the spirit blood of Gonggong was hidden in the most inconspicuous part of his body. Therefore, Ma Yujie alone couldn't extract the spirit blood of Gonggong. He knew that if he wanted to get the spirit blood, he still had to rely on Zhuowen. If Zhuowen really absorbed all the spirit blood because of his breakthrough, then all his efforts in entering the dark door would be in vain. Suddenly, a vast and terrifying aura caught Ma Yujie's attention. Zhuowen's clone, who was seated at the very front, suddenly opened his eyes. His body was translucent to the extreme, as if his entire body was transparent. However, the presence he gave off was like that of a huge beast that had just awakened. It was terrifying and frightening. Roar! Zhuowen's clone suddenly raised his head and roared at the sky. His roar throbbed violently like thunder. The wind and clouds swept, and the world shook. A terrifying aura burst out from Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's eyes shone with excitement. His clone's Pangu sacred body had finally broken through from the peak of the 5-star level to the early stage of the 6-star level. Zhuowen felt that his clone was full of power. This kind of power made him feel like he could control everything. It made Zhuowen feel an indescribable pride in his heart. Phew, fortunately, I have Gonggong's spirit blood. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for me to break through to the 6-star level with just Gonggong's poisonous insects. Zhuowen murmured to himself. His eyes were filled with joy. At the same time, he lamented the difficulty of advancing his Pangu's sacred body. In the past, he could at least advance 1 star with the help of Gonggong's poisonous insects. Now that his Pangu's sacred body had reached the 5-star level, it was much more difficult to advance. Chapter 3027 that inherited Zhuowen knew that it would be more difficult for him to upgrade his Pangu's sacred body in the future. Moreover, he had a hunch that he would need more than 1 venomous worm to upgrade his 6-star Pangu sacred body to 7-star. Thinking of this, Zhuowen was a little worried. The Pangu's sacred body was indeed a big eater. He could not even fill his stomach. He could imagine that in the next period of time he would have to constantly search for a large number of resources and ancestral sorcery venomous worms in order to upgrade his Pangu's sacred body. Brother Zhuo, I thought you were going to suck all of Gonggong's blood essence. Ma Yujie quickly came to Zhuowen and said to Zhuowen. He was obviously relieved. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie and noticed that Gonggong's corpse behind him had become thinner. He suddenly thought of something and said awkwardly, I've been cultivating all this time. I didn't notice that I had absorbed so much essence blood. By the way, Brother Ma, how long have I been cultivating? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. 2 days. There is still 1 day before the next teleportation. It is enough time for us to collect enough blood essence, Ma Yujie said in a deep voice. How much blood essence do you need? Zhuowen asked. He. It would be best if it was all of Gong Gong's blood essence. Ma Yujie rubbed his hands. Zhuowen looked at the fatty speechlessly. This guy is too greedy, isn't he? I am just kidding. Just fill this barrel for me. Ma Yujie also saw the strange look in Zhuowen's eyes. He was a little embarrassed. He took out a barrel that was half the height of a man from his spirit ring and put it in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen took the barrel and jumped on Gong Gong's chest. He reached out his right hand and a light blue venomous worm appeared in his palm. It was Gong Gong's venomous worm. The venomous worm drilled into Gong Gong's chest and made a small hole. Zhuowen used his spirit sense to reach deep into Gong Gong's chest and soon found the space where the blood essence was hidden. With a sweep of his divine sense, he swept up all the essence blood in the space and poured it into the wooden bucket. Soon, the wooden bucket was filled with Gong Gong's spirit blood, which was full of energy. Take it. Zhuowen handed the wooden bucket to Ma Yujie, who excitedly took the wooden bucket and put it into his spirit ring. The Gong Gong goo worm crawled out again and stood on Zhuowen's palm, hissing as if it was very unhappy. Are you complaining for Gong Gong? Zhuowen gave a bitter smile. After all, Gong Gong was one of the 12 ancestors of Magi and used to be one of the most powerful beings in this starry sky. Later on, he died and his corpse was immortal. Now that he had been found, his blood essence was actually going to be divided among others. How tragic was this? Hiss, hiss, hiss. The Gong Gong goo bug suddenly moved to the spot between Gong Gong's eyebrows and hissed, seeming to want Zhuowen to go over. Zhuowen had no choice but to follow. Looking at the goo bug's movements, it seemed to want him to put his palm between Gong Gong's eyebrows. Zhuowen hesitated for a while, but still put his right hand between Gong Gong's eyebrows. Suddenly, there was a boom in his mind, like a thunderbolt rumbling. Immediately, an ancient image appeared in the depths of his mind. This image showed the 12 ancestors of Magi and the 3 pure ones fighting against chaos. Zhuowen had seen this image in the memories of other ancestors of Magi before. He knew that the 12 ancestors of Magi and the 3 pure ones fell because of the invasion of chaos. He also knew that the invasion of chaos was only temporary. Once it stirred up trouble again, it would be a great disaster in this starry sky. The image quickly changed to Gong Gong, who was severely injured and drifting in the starry sky. Finally, he entered the depths of the dark portal and sealed his venomous worm before he died, and set up the altar of the Magi god to store his body. Human, I feel Panga's aura on you. You have received Pangu's inheritance? Suddenly, a deep voice sounded in Zhuowen's ears. Zhuowen looked around blankly, only to find that after the image disappeared, the space he was in was pitch black. The voice seemed to come from the depths of the darkness, making him unable to identify the specific direction. You are Ancestor Magi Gong Gong? You're not dead? Zhuowen frowned slightly and could not help but ask. I'm already dead. This is only a trace of my soul. If I didn't feel the aura of my venomous worm and Panga's aura on you, I would have killed you when you absorbed my essence blood. Gong Gong's voice was faint with a terrifying majesty that Zhuowen could not imagine. Cold sweat trickled down Zhuowen's forehead. This was an Ancestor Magi level powerhouse, a powerhouse who stood at the peak of the starry sky. Even if he was dead, if he attacked him with just a trace of his divine consciousness, he would probably lose a layer of skin even if he did not die. It seemed that these real almighty powerhouses were not to be trifled with, even if they were dead. Human, you haven't answered my first question. Gong Gong's voice sounded a little impatient. You're right. I have indeed received Panga's inheritance and cultivated Panga's sacred body, Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Gong Gong suddenly fell silent. After a while, he spoke again and said, No wonder you can integrate with my venomous worm. You have cultivated Panga's sacred body. Your Panga's sacred body has just been promoted to 6 stars, right? Gong Gong asked in a deep voice. Yes, it's all thanks to your venomous worm. Zhuowen smiled awkwardly. You have inherited Panga's inheritance, so you should know your mission. In the future, you must fight against the approaching chaos for this starry sky. Even if you die, you must resist the invasion of the chaos. Do you understand? Gong Gong said faintly. Zhuowen could only nod, but he did not take it seriously. The chaos was too far away from him, and Zhuowen had never seen what the chaos was like. Therefore, he did not agree with this mission. Originally, I left my venomous worm and body to look for an inheritor. Since you are Panga's inheritance, it is the same for me to pass on my power to you. Next, you must follow my instructions. I will pass on all my life's energy to you, so that your Panga's sacred body can be further improved. As soon as Gong Gong finished speaking, Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes. His right hand was still in the position between Gong Gong's eyebrows. Zhuowen's eyes were very serious. He took a deep look at Gong Gong, and Gong Gong's vicissitude voice sounded in his mind. Sit on my Tianling acupoint, and I will pass on my energy to you. If you can't bear it, tell me in advance, and I will stop passing on my energy. Zhuowen nodded, then went to Gong Gong's Tianling acupoint and sat down cross-legged. Immediately, Gong Gong's huge body began to emit a sparkling light. Chapter 30:28. The disappearing corpse. At this moment, Ma Yujia's eyes were full of satisfaction after obtaining a bucket of ancestral witch's blood essence. He began to search around the ancestral witch's corpse to see if there were any other treasures. But soon he found that there was something wrong with the ancestral witch's corpse. It was because the ancestral witch's corpse began to emit white light, which formed into light spots that floated up. Ma Yujia followed the direction of the light spots and saw Zhuowen sitting on Gong Gong's Tianling acupoint at a glance. These light spots all gathered in Zhuowen's body. This guy, he's going to eat it all. Ma Yujia held his forehead. There was a trace of speechlessness in his eyes, but it was more serious. In fact, when he was close to ancestral witch Gong Gong, he had a bad feeling that if he tried to extract the ancestral witch's blood essence himself, he would definitely end up badly. Ma Yujia believed in his hunch, so he wisely didn't do it before. Instead, he let Zhuowen do it. After all, the latter had fused with Gong Gong's poisonous insects and cultivated the Pangu's sacred body. He was more qualified to extract the ancestral witch's blood essence than Ma Yujia. Ma Yujia suspected that Gong Gong might still have a trace of his remnant soul. Once someone touched his corpse, they would probably suffer a strong backlash. Zhuowen might have communicated with Gong Gong's remnant soul and gained its approval. Now, Gong Gong wanted to pass his inheritance directly to Zhuowen. Thinking of this, Ma Yujia couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. I think the biggest winner this time should be this guy. Not only did he get Gong Gong's poisonous insects, but he also got Gong Gong's inheritance. Fortunately, I already got a bucket of blood essence. Otherwise, thinking of the Phoenix People Saintess, Zhong, Li, and Hao Yan who hadn't come up yet, Ma Yujia knew that they probably wouldn't be able to get any benefits. Time gradually passed. After 20 hours, ancestral witch Gong Gong's huge corpse turned into light spots and gathered in Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were shining with an unblinking light. He kept operating the Pangu's sacred body and absorbing the energy that ancestral, which Gong Gong had passed on to him. He could clearly feel that the level of his Pangu's sacred body was increasing as he absorbed the energy. When the inheritance of Gong Gong ended, Ji Hao merged the last stream of energy into his body. His body was scorching hot like never before. Creak, creak. The doppelganger slowly stood up, and its body actually burst out with continuous, explosive sounds. An aura even fiercer than before emerged from the doppelganger's body. Gong Gong's legacy directly upgraded my Pangu's sacred body from the early 6-star level to the late 6-star level. Zhuowen's eyes were as dazzling as the stars. He jumped up in excitement and couldn't help but laugh heartily. The clone leaped to the main body's side and entered the main body with a single step, merging with the main body. Zhuowen was bursting with confidence. With his current strength, even the top geniuses like the Phoenix People Saintess and Zhongli Haoyan were no match for him. Brother Zhuo, you've inherited the legacy of ancestor Magus Gong Gong. Ma Yujie approached Zhuowen and asked cautiously, looking at him. Yes, Gong Gong left a trace of his soul in his mind. Later, he communicated with me and passed the legacy to me. Zhuowen said with a smile. You're really lucky, Ma Yujie muttered, lamenting the unfairness of the world. But soon he calmed down and said in a deep voice, You've taken the entire legacy of Gong Gong. I think Zhongli Haoyan and the Phoenix People Saintess won't let you go. They came here for the essence blood of the ancestor Magus. But you? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and grinned. I've inherited the legacy of Gong Gong, and I still have a part of the essence blood of the ancestor Magus. But I only give it to people who are pleasing to the eye. As for the alien race, hee. Gong Gong's essence blood was hidden in a mysterious space inside Gong Gong's body. After Zhuowen had inherited the legacy of Gong Gong, the essence blood in that mysterious space was also stored in the big world by Zhuowen. To be honest, Zhuowen had absorbed too much essence blood before. In fact, he had absorbed most of Gong Gong's essence blood, so there was not much left. Ma Yujie rubbed his hands and said shamelessly, Brother, you still have essence blood in you. Well, give me some more. Zhuowen was speechless as he looked at the thick-skinned Ma Yujie. Ma Yujie felt a little helpless. He could now feel that since this guy's Pangu's sacred body had been upgraded, his strength had become much more terrifying than before. In the past, he might have been able to suppress this guy, but now he might be suppressed. When he thought of this, a sense of danger rose in Ma Yujie's heart. He needed to raise his cultivation a little more. Otherwise, Zhuowen would quickly overtake him. It seems that the barrier of the altar is disappearing. Zhuowen found that the barrier between the void space and the altar below was disappearing. At this moment, the power that restricted the airspace above them was also being weakened. The altar of the sorcerer god and the power around it were originally powered by Gong Gong's corpse. Now that Gong Gong's corpse has disappeared and you have inherited his legacy, I'm afraid that everything will disappear this time. Ma Yujie lowered his head and analyzed, then continued. Brother Zhuo, I think you'd better run away later. No matter if it's the human race or the alien race, after discovering that Gong Gong's corpse has disappeared, I'm afraid that the first thing they will suspect is us. Run away. I don't plan to run away yet. I have something to do with the saintess of the Phoenix people. Zhuowen shook his head. Ma Yujie shrugged and said, It's up to you if you don't want to run away. I'll definitely run away. Seeing that the void space had completely dissipated, Ma Yujie said goodbye to Zhuowen and disappeared on the spot. Zhuowen looked at Ma Yujie, who disappeared without a trace, with a trace of caution in his eyes. Ma Yujie was not only terrifyingly powerful, but he was also very good at escaping. Even he had not been able to capture his escape route and traces. Meanwhile, Zhuowen leisurely landed on the white plaza below. Zhongli Haoyan and the saintess of the Phoenix people, who were about to enter the array of the altar and teleport into the void space above, stared blankly at Zhuowen, who was descending from above. Not only were the two women stunned, but the human and alien race teams were also stunned. What was going on? Wasn't there supposed to be a terrifying restrictive power in the square? Cultivators couldn't fly up, let alone come down from above. They could only teleport through the array. But what was going on now? They also realized that the fat man, who had always been by Zhuowen's side, had disappeared. Although they could see Gong Gong's huge body in the void space from the square, they could only vaguely see it. Chapter 3029. Moses' provocation, although the huge body of ancestral shaman Gong seemed to have disappeared, which surprised everyone. They didn't pay too much attention to it. They thought that some kind of formation had appeared in the space and concealed the scene inside. Now that the restrictive force in the sky had disappeared, the void space was completely revealed to everyone. Gong's body was gone, and so was the fat man, leaving only the scarred youth in front of them. Long Wen, where is ancestral shaman Gong's body? The Phoenix People's saintess suddenly berated. She had a bad premonition. Zhuowen didn't pay attention to the Phoenix People's saintess. Instead, he waved his hand, took out 7 jade bottles, and distributed them to the 7 people in the human team. Jiang Qixing put away the jade bottles and asked doubtfully, "Brother Long, what is this?" Zhongli Haoyan, Yi Qidong, and the others also held the jade bottles, looking confused. "This is ancestral shaman Gong's blood essence," Zhuowen said indifferently. "What? It's ancestral shaman's blood essence." Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes widened, and she hurriedly opened the bottle cork. She immediately smelled blood. Of course, along with the smell of blood was a rich energy that shocked her. This energy was so surging that she hurriedly closed the bottle cork. She was certain that this jade bottle contained ancestral shaman Gong's blood essence. Although her purpose in entering the door of darkness was to obtain the ancestral shaman's blood essence, she also knew that they didn't know how to extract it. They would be satisfied with just a few drops. But now they had directly obtained a bottle of ancestral shaman's blood essence. This harvest greatly exceeded their expectations. "Brother Long, thank you for your generosity." Zhongli Haoyan put away the jade bottles and solemnly bowed deeply to Zhuowen. She knew very well that even if she personally went to ancestral shaman Gong's body, she, who didn't know how to extract it, couldn't obtain so much ancestral shaman's blood essence. Yi Qidong, Jiang Qixing, Yao Xiangjuan, and the others all thanked Zhuowen from the bottom of their hearts. It had to be said that Zhuowen's generosity had helped them a lot. Even Situ Liangji, who had kowtowed to Zhuowen and called him grandpa, sincerely bowed and thanked Zhuowen. Compared to the preciousness of the ancestral shaman's blood essence, kowtowing and calling him grandfather was simply a small matter that wasn't worth mentioning. If Zhuowen asked him to kowtow and call him grandpa now, he would definitely do it without hesitation. When the saintess of the Phoenix people saw that Zhuowen was actually distributing the ancestral witch's blood essence, her beautiful eyes narrowed. She immediately became furious and said, "You actually have the ancestral witch's blood essence? Did you cause Gong's corpse to disappear? Did you take Gong's body away?" As soon as the Phoenix People's saintess said this, the eyes of the foreign races turned hostile. Even the eyes of the human race flickered. No one knew what they were thinking. Compared to a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence, the entire ancestral witch's body was obviously more precious. If Gong's body was really taken away by this person, it would definitely be a big deal. If news of this spread out, this person would probably attract the attention of many powerful beings. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy as he said coldly, "The ancestral witch's body is rarely seen in the secular world. I think that in this part of the universe, there are basically no spatial artifacts that can contain the ancestral witch's body. Saintess, your words are unreasonable." "Ha! Unreasonable? Then tell me, where did Gong's body go? Other than being taken away by you, is there any other possibility?" The Phoenix People's saintess sneered. "I received the ancestral, which Gong's inheritance, and I did indeed obtain a part of the ancestral witch's blood essence. I gave away a part of it, and now I only have this last bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence. As for Gong's body, after the ancestral witch's inheritance, it collapsed and turned into countless specks of light." Zhuowen looked calm. With a flick of his finger, he took out another jade bottle and waved it in front of the Phoenix People's saintess. Zhuowen said this because he did not want others to think that the ancestral witch's body was taken away by him. Compared to the ancestral witch's body, the ancestral witch's inheritance required luck, and it was not suitable for everyone. Therefore, he said that the ancestral witch's inheritance was more suitable than directly obtaining the ancestral witch's body. After all, the ancestral witch's body contained the ancestral witch's blood essence, which was something that almost all human and alien races desired. If he really did obtain it, he would be attacked by all. However, not everyone was interested in the ancestral witch's inheritance. At least, the human race was not interested in it. After all, the ancestral witch's inheritance was very different from the human race's cultivation method. Zhuowen cultivated the Pangu sacred body, and he did not directly inherit the ancestral witch's cultivation method. Instead, he inherited the last bit of energy from the ancestral witch's body. Of course, although the method of inheriting the ancestral witch's inheritance was safer than taking away the ancestral witch's body, it was still very dangerous. If the news spread, there would probably still be many people from the human race and alien race who would hunt him down. Zhuowen had already thought about this when he received the ancestral witch's inheritance, so he was already mentally prepared. The only thing that comforted him was that his Pangu sacred body had finally made a breakthrough and reached the late 6-star level. He finally had the power to protect himself. Now, just by relying on the power of his avatar, he could fight against the Creation Lord. He could even defeat the slightly weaker Creation Lord. As for Senki-in, who was a supreme expert at the early stage of the sky-reaching realm, Zhuowen might not be a match for him at all. However, if such an expert wanted to squash him like an ant, it was not very likely. In front of such an expert, Zhuowen still had the power to protect himself to a certain extent with the various trump cards he had. You've obtained the ancestral witch's inheritance? That's impossible. You're just a human. How could you have obtained the ancestral witch's approval? The saintess of the Phoenix people shook her head, then spread her hands at Zhuowen and said, "Give this jade bottle to me. Then hand over the ancestral witch's inheritance, and I won't do anything to you. I'll let you live." Zhuowen chuckled and said, "Do you think I'm an idiot? You want me to hand over the ancestral witch's inheritance? You're dreaming. So you don't want to hand it over?" The saintess of the Phoenix people's pretty face was cold, and her beautiful eyes became very unfriendly. A wave of killing intent burst forth from her. Moses took a big step forward and shouted coldly, "Little bastard, do you know who our saintess is? It's your honor to ask you to hand over the ancestral witch's inheritance and blood essence. Why are you still chattering over there? If you know what's good for you, hand it over quickly. Don't force us to make a move." "Oh, if I don't hand it over, you're going to make a move?" Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a sharp light, and he looked coldly at Moses. Moses had been harboring evil intentions towards him ever since he entered the door of darkness. Zhuowen had long since found this alien an eyesore. Previously, he had been busy breaking the formation. Moses was quite strong, and it would take some effort to kill him. Moreover, he might have to expose his trump card, the Ho-E Divine Bow. Thus, Zhuowen had not made a move until now. Chapter 30:30. Tyrannical Moses was furious. He was getting more and more annoyed with the scarred youth. Before entering the door of darkness, he had already killed quite a number of people from the Merfolk tribe. Furthermore, he had even killed the genius of the Merfolk tribe, Sauron. Even Elder MDA had suffered at the hands of this fellow. Now this kid was even more unrepentant, contradicting him like this. To be more precise, this kid seemed to be looking down on him, not putting him in his eyes at all. This kind of contempt made Moses very unhappy. This guy was just a mere human, and his cultivation was only at the eternal overlord level. What right did he have to look down on him? "I'll make my move today. You don't respect the saintess, which means you're looking down on us foreign races. Today, I'll teach you a lesson." Moses snorted coldly. With a stomp of his right foot, he shot out like a cannonball, rapidly rushing towards Zhuowen. The Phoenix People's Saintess watched this scene silently, not stopping it. She also didn't put Zhuowen in her eyes, but she was very dissatisfied with Zhuowen's attitude. Moses's move came at the right time. She was very clear about Moses's strength. Among this group of people, Moses should be second only to her and Zhongli Haoyan. He was even stronger than Yi Qigong. He was very powerful. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes turned cold when she saw Moses attack again. Just as she was about to attack, a blazing aura came crashing towards her. Zhongli Haoyan raised her head slightly and immediately discovered the source of the aura was the Phoenix People's Saintess. At this moment, the Phoenix People's Saintess was staring coldly at her. Zhongli Haoyan knew very well that if she dared to help Zhuowen, the Phoenix People's Saintess would immediately attack her. Although Zhongli Haoyan was very confident in her own strength, she knew that the Phoenix People's Saintess was even more terrifying. If she were to face the Phoenix People's Saintess head-on, she might not be able to gain much of an advantage. She might even be at a disadvantage. Thinking of this, Zhongli Haoyan didn't act rashly. She just looked at Zhuowen's back and sighed, feeling a little guilty. After all, Zhuowen had just given her a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence, but she was unable to help when Moses attacked. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan's expressions changed greatly as they secretly cursed Moses for being shameless. However, Moses's movements were simply too fast. In addition, the disparity in strength between them and Moses was too great. Even if they went over, they would only be cannon fodder. On the other hand, Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji merely stood where they were with flickering eyes. They had no intention of attacking at all. Zhuowen silently watched all of this and sneered in his heart. In the human clan team, apart from Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan, only Zhongli Haoyan was a little more upright. The others were just joking around. Haha, you dare to be absent-minded in front of a great enemy? You really don't know how the word death is written. At this moment, Moses had already rushed in front of Zhuowen. He could see at a glance that Zhuowen was actually absent-minded. He was annoyed and angry in his heart. He suddenly punched out, and endless astral winds swept out. Moses wanted to directly smash this hateful and arrogant human's cheek with a punch, then cripple his limbs and finally slowly torture him to death. What a terrifying fist wind. This Moses is going all out. I'm afraid Brother Long is in danger. Zhongli Haoyan also felt Moses's terrifying fist wind. Her pretty face slightly froze, and there was some worry in her beautiful eyes. Zhuowen stood in place with a calm expression. There was no change in his expression. As Moses's fist got closer and closer, he slowly stretched out his right hand. The movement of his right hand was very slow, but it accurately caught Moses's right fist. Bang! The moment Moses's fist hit Zhuowen's right palm, a muffled sound like thunder exploded. Then Moses was shocked to find that the human in front of him didn't even sway. He was as still as a mountain, standing in front of him. As for the scene that he imagined of this person's cheek being smashed by him, it didn't happen. At the same time, Moses saw the face of the young man in front of him again. There was a faintly discernible, mocking expression on his face. Moses was furious. This guy actually dared to mock him. Die for me. Flood dragon explosion. Moses's empty left fist suddenly hooked up and smashed out fiercely. Suddenly, the space between the two of them collapsed. From the collapsed spatial rift, countless tides surged out, manifesting one after another terrifying and ferocious flood dragon after another. These flood dragons instantly surrounded Zhuowen and then began to tighten around Zhuowen, wanting to completely strangle him. The tide receded, and the flood dragons gradually disappeared, but Moses's face was full of horror. This was because he found that the palm that was holding his right fist didn't loosen. Instead, it tightened fiercely. The strength was so great that he couldn't help but groan in pain. Moses, that's all you've got. The tide collapsed, and Juoen still stood in the same place like a mountain. The mocking expression on his face became more intense, and the fear in Moses's eyes became more profound. How is this possible? You're not hurt at all, Moses said in a trembling voice. He suddenly realized that he was so small in front of this human in front of him. It was as if this human in front of him could take his life at will with just a thought. This feeling intensified the fear in his heart, and he couldn't help but cry out in fear. Previously, you've been clamoring in front of me, calling me a little bastard, an ant, as if I'm not worth mentioning at all in front of you. You can easily crush me if you want to. Crack! As Juoen spoke, his right hand suddenly clenched and directly crushed Moses's right fist. Moses screamed in horror, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. I saw that you've been clamoring for so long, and I really thought that you were so powerful that you could easily crush me to death. Now it seems you're just a dog that knows how to bark. As for your strength, it really disappoints me. As Juoen spoke indifferently, his right hand suddenly twisted, and Moses's right hand was directly torn off by him. You said that I didn't respect the saint and wanted to teach me a lesson. Then what about that lesson? Rip! Juoen also tore off Moses's left arm, leaving behind Moses's shrill screams. You said that I was distracted in front of a great enemy and didn't know how to write the word death. But let me tell you now, I really do know how to write the word death. Juoen held Moses's legs with both hands and tore them off, and a mist of blood gushed out. Moses fell to the ground, and blood flowed all over the ground. Juoen slowly squatted down in front of Moses and used the blood on the ground to write the word death in front of Moses. Did you see the word death clearly? After Juoen finished writing the word death, he grabbed Moses's head and said indifferently. Moses felt fear. The fear of death was so close to him, and he was terrified. I beg you to spare my life. Moses's voice was filled with regret. Juoen didn't say anything. Instead, his right hand formed a finger and pressed it on Moses's forehead. A terrifying and violent force surged into Moses's divine soul, completely dissipating it. Moses stared at Juoen and finally fell on the word death and completely lost his breath. Chapter 30:31. The confrontation, the entire place was silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Moses, who was lying in a pool of blood. It was as if they had all become mutes. None of them spoke a word. In the air, one could even hear the slightly uneasy breathing of the crowd. Compared to the humans, the foreign races were even more silent. Their gazes were fixed on the dead Moses for a long time before finally shifting to Juoen. The beautiful eyes of the Phoenix people's saintess fell on Juoen. The shock in her eyes had been replaced by anger and killing intent. Faced with the gazes of the foreign races, Juoen was calm and composed. He slowly stood up and looked at the Phoenix people's saintess fearlessly. Juoen took out the jade bottle again and shook it in front of the Phoenix people's saintess. He said calmly, Saintess, I have a few questions for you. If you answer me truthfully, the ancestral witch's blood essence in this jade bottle is yours. Also, I won't attack the foreign races anymore. Oh, you intend to implicate us in the grudge between you and Moses? You want to deal with us? The beautiful eyes of the Phoenix people's saintess slowly narrowed. Illusory flames appeared all over her body. The strange thing was that although these flames were illusory, they had the burning pain of real flames. Waves of heat swept out one after another, causing the surrounding temperature to rise rapidly. The surrounding people also felt the sudden rise in temperature. Their expressions changed slightly as they looked at the Phoenix people's saintess with fear. Just the burning aura that erupted was already so powerful. They had no doubt that if the Phoenix people's saintess were to attack with all her might, there were probably not many people here who could stop her. The dozen foreign races following behind the saintess did not look away. They roared and released a powerful aura as they stared coldly at Juoen. Saintess, have you forgotten about us? Suddenly, a clear voice rang out. Zhongli Haoyan took a step forward and came to Zhuan's side. A powerful aura that was not weaker than that of the Phoenix people's Saintess burst out from Zhongli Haoyan's body. It was like the endless waves of the ocean, surging up wave after wave, blocking the scorching aura released by the Phoenix people's Saintess. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing stood on Zhuan's side without hesitation. On the other hand, the eyes of Yi Qidong, Sita Liangji, and the others flickered. They hesitated for a moment before walking up. However, from their expressions, it could be seen that they weren't particularly willing to stand up for Zhuan. Perhaps it was also because of Hao Yan's face. Although the strength Zhuan had just displayed was terrifying, and he had even given each of them a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence, it was still not enough. After all, Zhuan was just a loose cultivator without any background. Although they had received the favor of this loose cultivator, it was impossible for them to break off their relationship with a noble existence like the Phoenix People's Saintess for a mere loose cultivator. The Saintess of the Phoenix People's pretty face changed slightly. She coldly looked at Zhongli Haoyan and said, Zhongli Haoyan, are you really going to stand up for this loose cultivator? You should know that if you stand up now, you will offend the Mare people and Phoenix people, 2 of the top 10 races of the primitive heaven domain. Even if you don't think for yourself, I think you should think for the heavenly temple behind you. I think your heavenly temple will definitely not offend both the Phoenix people and the Mare people for a loose cultivator. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes darkened. She coldly said, If I act now, I represent myself, Zhongli Haoyan, and not the heavenly temple behind me. Brother Longwen has helped me, so I have to repay him. This is a matter of heaven and earth. Saintess, you don't need to use the matter between forces to pressure me. The Phoenix People's Saintess did not get angry. Her beautiful eyes moved and fell on Yi Qidong, Sita Liangji, and the others. She said, Do you have the same thoughts as Zhongli Haoyan? Yi Qidong and Sita Liangji immediately showed hesitation. Their eyes flashed, and then they took a few steps back. They cupped their hands at Zhongli Haoyan from afar, intending to stand by and watch. Yao Xiangjuan saw that Yi Qidong and Sita Liangji did not intend to participate and could not help but become anxious. Zhuan waved his hand and stopped Yao Xiangjuan. He had not given out the ancestral witch's blood essence to win over Yi Qidong and Sita Liangji, but he did not want to have a conflict with the human race in front of this alien race. Taking out a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence was clearly the best way. Anyway, he had a lot of ancestral witch's blood essence. This was just a drop in the ocean for him. Moreover, he did not intend to ask for help from others when he faced the Phoenix People's Saintess. Of course. Zhongli Haoyan stood up for him, which made him look at her in a new light. Dealing with some cats and dogs, I don't need too much help. Zhuan shook his head at Yao Xiangjuan. Although Yao Xiangjuan was still angry, since the person involved, Zhuan, had said so, she could only let it go. Cats and dogs? Longwen, aren't you a little too arrogant? You defeated Moses by luck, and you don't put us alien races in your eyes? The Phoenix People's Saintess was so angry that she laughed, but her beautiful eyes were even colder. Saintess, why are you talking nonsense with this guy who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth? Let's attack together and take down this human. When the time comes, we will deprive him of his 5 senses and let him fall into the Avicii hell and suffer for eternity. A member of the alien race with a human face and a tiger body strode forward. He held a bronze halberd in his hand and looked coldly at Zhuan as he spoke hatefully. Zhuan shook his head and looked at the Phoenix People's Saintess indifferently. He sneered and said, I'm not so petty as to deal with you alien races because of Moses. It's because you alien races have gone too far. At this point, Zhuan's eyes were very cold. That coldness penetrated deep into one's heart. I remember that you said that you were in an alliance with us humans, so you should work together and help each other. But Why do I see that you alien races have joined forces and are constantly hunting down us humans? Because of this, most of us humans have died at the hands of you alien races. Zhuowen looked coldly at the Phoenix People's Saintess in front of him. His voice was very low and cold. What? You alien races have joined forces to kill us humans in the Door of Darkness? Zhongli Haoyan's pretty face changed slightly. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at the Phoenix People's Saintess, and her voice was as cold as ice as she questioned. Miss Zhongli, you don't know. Someone should have informed you of this through a communication jade talisman, right? Zhuowen frowned. He looked at Zhongli Haoyan, who seemed to be completely unaware of this, and felt very confused. In his opinion, Zhongli Haoyan and the others should have known that the alien races had joined forces to kill the humans in the Door of Darkness. Of course, Zhongli Haoyan and the others knew about this, but they didn't come back to lead the humans against the alien races. This actually made Zhuowen a little unhappy. Chapter 3032. Zhongli Haoyan takes action. Zhongli Haoyan smiled bitterly. Brother Long, you don't know, but I'm the only disciple of Heavenly Temple who entered the Door of Darkness. Here, apart from Brother Yi and a few others, I'm not familiar with anyone else. Hearing this, Zhuowen suddenly realized that Zhongli Haoyan didn't seem to be lying, and during this period of contact, he found that Zhongli Haoyan's character was quite good. She shouldn't leave the human race in the lurch. Zhuowen glanced sideways at Yi Qidong, Sita Liangji, and the others who were watching from the sidelines, and his eyes revealed a meaningful look. Yi Qidong, Sita Liangji, and the others naturally noticed Zhuowen's gaze. Their eyes flickered, and they avoided looking at him. Zhuowen withdrew his gaze, no longer paying attention to Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji. He already had a conclusion in his heart. Obviously, it was pardonable that Zhongli Haoyan didn't know about this, but Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji definitely knew. However, the two of them clearly prioritized finding ancestral shaman Gongong's corpse, and they didn't even tell Zhongli Haoyan about this. They understood Zhongli Haoyan's character. After learning this news, she would definitely give up on finding ancestral shaman Gongong's corpse and go to deal with the human race's predicament first. The two of them wanted to find ancestral shaman's corpse as soon as possible, so they naturally didn't want to waste time because of this matter. So they kept it a secret and didn't let Zhongli Haoyan know. Zhongli Haoyan also seemed to realize something. She glanced at Yi Qidong and Sita Liangji with a trace of anger in her beautiful eyes. Brother Long, what happened to the other humans in the Door of Darkness? Zhongli Haoyan asked with some shame. She was really ashamed. After all, she was the first on the Starry Sky contribution list, the #1 prodigy of the human race. She had a very high prestige among the young talents of the human race. Now, many of her fellow humans were in trouble, but she actually didn't know about it and even came here to find ancestral shaman Gongong's corpse. She felt very guilty. Senior sister, Zhongli, don't worry, the Foreign Race Alliance was basically wiped out by Brother Long. The leaders of 3 teams, Hu Ben, Sharu, and Leng Bai, all died at Brother Long's hands. Yao Xiangjuan said with a smile, "You took care of the Foreign Race Alliance." Zhongli Haoyan was slightly startled. Then she bowed to Zhuowen and said gratefully, "Brother Long, thank you for your help. On behalf of my fellow humans, I sincerely thank you." As she spoke, Zhongli Haoyan passed the ancestral shaman blood essence in her hand to Zhuowen and said, "I'm ashamed to accept this blood essence. Brother Long, take it back and use it yourself." "You, SSist, S's, S eyes after all I hout, Hevs no know that the human race TT. You, heavens is A Tess. YT S Chidung's SS. And there's their Yainu Yayang and the others. However, Yi Qidong and the others could not say anything. After all, if they were to talk about this matter, they were indeed in the wrong. On the other hand, the expressions of the foreign races changed drastically. The Phoenix people's holy maiden's expression darkened. Whether it was Hu Ben, Sharu, or Leng Bai, They were all famous geniuses in the primitive celestial realm. Although they couldn't compare to the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden and Moses, they were all geniuses with high status in their respective races. Furthermore, the three of them were extremely powerful. If they joined forces, even a pinnacle creator would have to face them head-on. However, the three of them had all been killed by Longwen. Not only that, but the three powerful foreign race teams led by Huben and the other two had also been annihilated. This was too unbelievable. However, when she thought about how Zhuowen had easily killed Moses, the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden felt that it made sense. The human in front of him was only an eternal overlord, but his strength was so terrifying that it struck fear in his heart. However, the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden wasn't afraid. Although the human in front of her was very strong, she was very confident in herself. She had the 99 Phoenix body, and her cultivation had reached the half-step creator level. Her innate abilities were also inherited from birth. Her strength was definitely one of the best among the younger generation in the primitive celestial realm. Moses's strength wasn't bad, but compared to the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden, the difference was too great. If the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden had fought with her full strength, Moses wouldn't have been able to withstand a single blow. Longwen, you've got guts. You actually dared to kill Huben, Sharu, and Lungbai. You even destroyed their 3 teams. Do you know that the 3 of them have extraordinary origins? Are they geniuses from the 10 major races of the primitive celestial realm? The Phoenix people's Holy Maiden slowly stepped forward. An even more terrifying and blazing aura surged from her body. The foreign races closest to her panicked and began to retreat, distancing themselves from her. Zhongli Haoyan's aura was instantly shattered by the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden's blazing aura. Zhongli Haoyan grunted and couldn't help but retreat a few steps. Her beautiful eyes stared at the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden in disbelief. I didn't expect you to have been hiding your strength all this time. This is your true strength. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes darkened. The moment her aura was completely shattered, she knew that she wasn't a match for this prodigy in front of her. Unfortunately, she had always thought that her strength should be about the same as the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden. Only now did she realize that there was a huge difference between the two of them. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan couldn't help but retreat because they couldn't withstand this terrifying and blazing aura. Their eyes were filled with fear. Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji, who were standing quite a distance away and watching with folded arms, were in a much better situation. After all, they weren't directly hit by the blazing aura. At the same time, they looked at Zhuowen's back with a trace of mockery and resentment. Just now, Zhuowen had exposed them in front of everyone, causing them to hold a grudge against him. Now, they were hoping that this guy would die in the hands of the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden. Of course, in their opinion, the best outcome would be for both sides to be seriously injured. However, this idea of both sides being seriously injured was completely extinguished when the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden went all out. Their eyes were filled with fear. This Phoenix people's Holy Maiden was too terrifying. Even they didn't have the slightest intention to resist such a terrifying aura. They knew that Longwen was definitely going to die. There wouldn't be any luck left. Longwen, run. I'll help you block her for a while. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes were filled with determination. She already knew that there was a huge gap between her and the Phoenix people's Holy Maiden. However, she wasn't an ungrateful person. Chapter 3033. Flying Swallow /Win stood there calmly. Although the aura of the saintess of the Phoenix people was terrifying, Zhuowen was not too afraid. Just as Zhuowen was about to unleash his Pangu sacred body, Zhongli Haoyan dashed toward the saintess of the Phoenix people like a light swallow. And the words Zhongli Haoyan said before she left, "I'll help you block for a while," were deeply engraved in Zhuowen's heart. Zhuowen wanted to pull Zhongli Haoyan back, but it was too late. Zhongli Haoyan had already arrived in front of the saintess of the Phoenix people. Zhongli Haoyan was using a blue divine sword. The surface of the divine sword was engraved with dense, blood-red patterns, and its aura was very strong. Zhuowen had estimated that the divine sword should be a creation-level divine weapon, and its level was not low. Flying swallow slash. Zhongli Haoyan's gaze was like a knife. At that moment, she seemed to have ignored the terrifying aura of the saintess of the Phoenix people. All she could see was the light blue divine sword in her hand. The saintess of the Phoenix people stopped and looked at Zhongli Haoyan, who was staring at her with cold eyes. She smiled contemptuously and said, "Zhongli Haoyan, you are no match for me. Since you want to be a moth to a flame, I will fulfill your wish." After she finished speaking, the Phoenix clan's holy maiden flipped her jade-like palm. Immediately, a dazzling flame erupted from her palm. The flame was scarlet red, and it transformed into a scarlet python. It violently shot out and exploded in front of Zhongli Haoyan. Bang, bang, bang. Zhongli Haoyan's gaze was still calm. She held the divine sword in her right hand and suddenly slashed it out. It was so fast that it seemed to have surpassed the speed of light. The saintess of the Phoenix people's expression changed. Zhuowen's gaze also changed. The saintess of the Phoenix people quickly retreated. The moment she did so, the red python was cut into countless pieces and scattered into countless sparks. The saintess of the Phoenix people landed lightly on the ground. Her beautiful eyes were solemn. Only now did she notice that the front part of her skirt had been completely destroyed. She had no doubt that if her reaction had been a beat slower, her feet would have been crushed. It's actually the flying swallow sword slash. This is Haoyan's strongest move. It's said that this move has a total of 49 moves, and each move is more terrifying than the last. It's like rolling waves, each wave higher than the last. Once enveloped by the flying swallow sword chop, the enemy will have to bear the brunt of the attack. The moment Yi Qidong saw Zhongli Haoyan's shocking sword, he revealed a serious expression. "Saintess, the flying swallow sword slash has just begun. I wonder if you can last till the end?" Zhongli Haoyan's faint voice sounded, like the echo of an empty valley, constantly reverberating in the surroundings. The Phoenix people's saintess raised her head and immediately saw Zhongli Haoyan's emotionless eyes. The moment she used the flying swallow sword slash, Zhongli Haoyan's emotions completely disappeared. Her eyes seemed to be completely focused on the divine sword in her hand, unmoved by anything else. Clang, clang, clang. Zhongli Haoyan's body was like a swallow, and she closed in on the Phoenix people saintess. Once again she attacked. The sword light was like water, cleansing the lead and poured down in midair, looking so beautiful and fierce. "Zhongli Haoyan, do you really think I can't do anything to you?" The Phoenix people's saintess was furious. She stomped her jade feet, and from the bottom of her feet, circles and circles of flame vortexes suddenly emerged. Boom! The flame vortexes grew bigger and bigger, and finally enveloped the Phoenix people saintess. At this moment, the Phoenix people saintess was like a proud phoenix, controlling the intense flames and constantly playing with them. Bang, bang, bang. Zhongli Haoyan was like a swallow, rapidly circling around the flame vortexes, and the divine sword in her hand constantly slashed out. Every strike was fatal, and every move was terrifying. Terrifying depressions appeared on the flame vortexes, but they still didn't break. Flying swallow slash, swallow returns to nest. Suddenly, Zhongli Haoyan's faint voice sounded in midair again. Meanwhile, Zhongli Haoyan soared into the sky. When she reached a certain height, she suddenly descended. Her speed exceeded the speed of light, and in the blink of an eye, she arrived in front of the flame vortexes. Boundless sword light appeared in front of Zhongli Haoyan, and it manifested into a singing swallow with its wings spread open, which landed in the flame vortexes. This is the final technique of the flying swallow slash, and also Haoyan's most powerful technique. How terrifying! This kind of battle has already exceeded the scope of what we can interfere in. Yi Qidong looked at the scene before him with a hint of admiration and loneliness in his eyes. Bang! The flame vortexes suddenly collapsed, and countless sparks burst forth. Amid the sparks, the saintess of the Phoenix people's saintess shocked eyes and fluttering veil could be seen. The swallow let out a loud cry and fell from the sky, landing on the saintess of the Phoenix people's saintess. Boom! The terrifying sound of the explosion was accompanied by an endless wave of air that swept out in all directions. Both the human and outsider forces were forced back again and again by this wave of power. Zhuowen also took a few steps back. His eyes were very serious as he looked at the battlefield covered by countless clouds of dust. He even used his divine sense to investigate. However, he discovered that the battlefield was completely suppressed by the terrifying auras of Zhongli Haoyan and the saintess of the Phoenix people. Although his divine sense could enter, his perception was greatly weakened, and he couldn't see the specific situation clearly. He only saw a person slowly standing up from the clouds of dust, while another person knelt on one knee on the ground. The person who stood up grabbed the neck of the person kneeling on the ground and threw him out. The person who was thrown out was as helpless as a falling leaf. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He discovered that the person who was thrown out was flying towards him. When the person broke through the clouds of dust and appeared in front of Zhuowen, Zhuowen discovered that it was Zhongli Haoyan. At this moment, Zhongli Haoyan's face was pale and she was constantly coughing up blood. There was a huge bloody hole in her chest, and a divine sword was stuck in that bloody hole. This divine sword was Zhongli Haoyan's sword. Zhuowen suddenly rushed out and caught Zhongli Haoyan in midair. Just as he was about to land on the ground, a blazing aura swept out from the clouds of dust and blasted toward his vital points. Zhuowen snorted coldly and suddenly blasted out his right palm. His palm emitted a sparkling light and collided with the blazing aura. That blazing aura was a flaming python, but it was dispersed by Zhuowen's palm. Zhuowen then landed on the ground with Zhongli Haoyan in his arms. Zhongli Haoyan coughed up another mouthful of blood. Only then did she see that the person who saved her was actually Zhuowen. Cough, cough. Brother Long, you didn't escape? Zhongli Haoyan said weakly. Zhuowen shook his head and did not answer Zhongli Haoyan's words. Instead, he waved at Yao Xiangjuan, who was not far away. Yao Xiangjuan quickly came to Zhuowen's side. Zhuowen handed Zhongli Haoyan to Yao Xiangjuan and said in a deep voice, "Junior sister Yao, I'll leave Miss Zhongli in your care for a while." Yao Xiangjuan quickly nodded. Her beautiful eyes fell on the clouds of dust in front of them. There a beautiful figure slowly walked out and said worriedly, "Brother Long, the saintess of the Phoenix people is too terrifying. You." Chapter 30-34. An unprecedented battle at this moment. Both the human race and the alien race had retreated far away. They stared at the beautiful figure slowly walking out from the depths of the dust cloud. Everyone's gazes were filled with respect, fear, and unknown emotions. This human is quite gutsy. After seeing the saintess' true strength, not only did he not run away, he even has the courage to accept her challenge. The alien race member with a human face and a tiger body stabbed his bronze halberd into the ground. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and sneered at Zhuowen, who was still standing at his original spot. On the human side, Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji couldn't help but shake their heads. This Long Wen is simply courting death. Can't he see that the Phoenix people's saintess strength far surpasses all of us here? In everyone's opinion, the Phoenix people's saintess already had the strength to kill an ordinary Lord of Creation. It was impossible for such a monster to appear in the younger generation of the human race. Only powerful alien races could produce a young genius like the Phoenix people's saintess. Therefore, no one thought that Long Wen would be a match for the Phoenix people's saintess when she unleashed her full strength. Whoosh! The beautiful figure finally walked in, and the dust cloud completely dissipated. Only now did Zhuowen realize that the Phoenix people's saintess ink-black hair had already turned fiery red. It was like a flame that constantly danced and fluttered in the wind, burning fiercely. The Phoenix people's saintess fair cheeks were covered in fiery red patterns. These patterns looked like the feathers of some kind of bird. Zhuowen knew that these patterns were in the shape of phoenix feathers. The Phoenix people's saintess glanced at Zhuowen indifferently and revealed a soul-stirring smile. Longwen, I didn't think that you would dare to stay and not leave. Could it be that you think you have the strength to fight with me? Zhuowen shook his head. When the Phoenix people's saintess saw Zhuowen shake his head, the smile on her face became even wider. There was even a hint of mockery in her smile. Saintess, that's where you're wrong. I should say that you'll definitely lose if you fight me. Zhuowen's next words froze the smile on the Phoenix people's face. You really have guts. You're about to die, and you still dare to joke with me. Unfortunately, I don't think your joke is very funny. After the Phoenix people's saintess finished speaking, she tapped the ground lightly with her jade-like feet. Like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves, she suddenly swept out and quickly swept toward Zhuowen. Wherever it passed, the air would explode and there would be loud explosions. It was as if the entire sky was collapsing. After this terrifying explosion, what followed was an extremely terrifying and scorching aura. It was as if his entire body had been thrown into a pill furnace, enduring the unbearable high temperature. It was as if he would be refined into a crystal-clear pill at any time. Zhuowen silently looked at the saintess, who was getting closer and closer. He slowly put his hands together, and a mysterious aura surged out from Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's body began to emit a crystal-clear light. This light became more and more intense and dazzling, like a small sun that was rapidly growing in a short period of time. Zhuowen's aura continued to rise at this moment. A ray of light shot up into the sky from his Tianling acupoint, illuminating the earth. Zhuowen used the Pangu's sacred body. Of course, he did not explode the full power of the Pangu's sacred body. He only used the power of an early 6-star Pangu sacred body. In his opinion, the power of an early 6-star Pangu sacred body was enough to crush all the young people present. Even the Phoenix people saintess, who had been hiding her strength, was no exception. Bang! When Zhuowen's aura skyrocketed to the peak, the Phoenix people saintess had already arrived in front of Zhuowen. She slowly struck out with her white, jade-like hand. This palm seemed slow, but it was just an illusion. In fact, it was extremely fast. It carried with it a scorching aura and a terrifying high temperature. Illusory flames lingered on the surface of her jade-like hand. These flames looked illusory on the surface, but they were actually more terrifying than real flames. Zhuowen also struck out with his fist, and the fist force erupted with white light. Bang, bang, bang. The moment the fists and palms collided, there was a dense, crackling sound in the air. It was as if someone had fallen from a tall building and was smashed to pieces. The sound was particularly horrifying. Invisible air waves spread out in a ring shape. The earth was cracking and the air was tumbling. The surrounding people from both the alien race and the human race were all pushed back by the air waves away from the battlefield. What a terrifying impact! Will Longwen be able to withstand the palm of the Phoenix people saintess? Jiang Qixing hurriedly protected Yao Xiangjuan and the seriously injured Zhongli Haoyan. After retreating to a safe distance, he muttered to himself with a look of horror in his eyes as he faced the terrifying wave of air that swept over. He should be able to. Yao Xiangjuan replied with some hesitation. Then Zhuowen definitely won't be able to survive. Didn't you see how terrifying that palm of the saintess was? It's probably comparable to the attack that injured Haoyan. Yi Qidong, Situ Liangji, and the others arrived not far from Jiang Qixing's group. The one who spoke was Yi Qidong. Jiang Qixing glanced at Yi Qidong with a complicated gaze and didn't answer. Speaking of which, in the human race, Jiang Qixing had known Yi Qidong for much longer than Zhuowen. The two of them were the 5 great monstrous geniuses of the host territory. The two of them had a good relationship for many years, and Jiang Qixing admired Yi Qidong greatly. However, Jiang Qixing was somewhat disappointed in Yi Qidong when he had taken the lead to stand by and watch Zhuan's matter. Yi Qidong also noticed Jiang Qixing's abnormality and thought of the reason, so he tactfully didn't continue speaking. Instead, his gaze fell on the battlefield in front of him. Although Yi Qidong felt that Zhuan wouldn't be able to withstand the palm of the Phoenix People's Saintess, he had a premonition that Longwen wasn't an ordinary person and wouldn't die just like that. Bang, bang, bang. In the center of the battlefield, smoke and dust tumbled like the tide in the sea. It was so thick that it was impossible to see the situation in the center of the battlefield. The battlefield, which had been silent for a while, suddenly erupted with the sound of explosions, one after another. As for the smoke and dust that permeated the air, it became even more intense due to the huge commotion within the battlefield. The degree of shaking was even greater and more intense than before. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that the battle was still ongoing. Brother Long, Jiang Qixing, and Yao Xiangjuan's eyes lit up. They knew that Longwen wouldn't be killed so easily. The smoke and dust in the battlefield became more and more intense. Clearly, the battle was also becoming more and more intense. Suddenly, a wild gale swept over, sweeping away a large amount of smoke and dust in the battlefield. Chapter 3035. Arousing the bloodline in this messy battlefield, the two figures were like two peerless gods of war as they constantly clashed. Violent energy overflowed in all directions. An entire space seemed to be split apart. Boom! A thunder-like, loud sound was transmitted from the figures that had once again collided. Immediately, countless energy ripples spread and burst apart. The two figures separated upon contact. Each of them withdrew thousands of steps and stood opposite each other in the distant, empty space. At this moment, Zhuan's body was sparkling and translucent, as if he was made of glass. He looked so perfect and flawless. The Phoenix People's Saintess was wrapped in fiery red energy, and her exposed skin was covered in dense patterns. These patterns were in the shape of phoenix feathers, flickering and emitting an extraordinary aura. This human, where did he come from? How can he fight against the Saintess with the 99 phoenix body and not be at a disadvantage? The foreign race that had retreated to the other side, the one with a human face and a tiger body, trembled as he looked at the sparkling and translucent Zhuan in disbelief. And for some reason, the aura on Zhuan's body made him have an impulse to worship him. This impulse was very strange and inexplicable. It wasn't just this foreign race with a human face and a tiger body. The other foreign races around also had this feeling. If it weren't for the fact that they still had some rationality, they might have all knelt on the ground and worshipped Zhuan. So powerful. Is this Brother Long's greatest strength? Even the Phoenix People's Saintess can't do anything to him. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were pleasantly surprised. Yi Qidong, Sita Liangji, and the others were all stunned and silent, not saying a word. On the other hand, Zhongli Haoyan sat up with difficulty, her beautiful eyes looking at Zhuan's figure like a peerless god of war, and said with a bitter smile, "I didn't expect this Longwen to be so powerful. Before I said that I would help him block for a while, but it seems that was completely unnecessary. I'm just showing off in front of an expert." "Your body!" The Phoenix People's Saintess stared at Zhuan's translucent body and said in a deep voice, "You don't have a human body at all? Who are you?" "I'm just a body refinement cultivator with no special background. I'm just an ordinary member of the human race. As for you, your 99 Phoenix body is actually so powerful, as expected of the powerful physique that the Phoenix people rarely encounter in 10,000 years. Zhuan looked at the flames around the Phoenix People's Saint. These flames were very difficult to deal with. They seemed to be able to burn everything. There was nothing that could not be burned. Every time Zhuan fought with the Holy Maiden, the flames that would suddenly burst out of her body were very difficult to deal with. Hearing Zhuowen's praise, the saintess of the Phoenix people lifted her chin slightly, revealing a trace of pride. She had always been the prodigy of the Phoenix people and had received countless praises and respect. She was already used to being praised. However, this was the first time she had been praised by someone of the same generation whose strength was not any weaker than hers. Therefore, even though she had always been calm, there were some fluctuations in her emotions, and a complicated feeling was born. You're not bad either. My 99 Phoenix body is already one of the top physiques in this galaxy. There are only a few people who can compare to my physique. However, you can fight with me with your physical body. Your body is definitely not ordinary. It's not something that can be controlled by humans. What kind of physique do you have? The Phoenix people's saintess beautiful eyes were clear. She stared at Zhuowen quietly, as if she wanted to see through Zhuowen completely. If you want to know the whereabouts of my physique, you have to tell me your real name first. Zhuowen stared at the Phoenix people's saintess. If he wanted to find out more about Mu Qinxue from this saintess, he had to understand her background first. Mu Qinxue definitely had the 99 Phoenix body. However, the saintess in front of him also had the 99 Phoenix body. This made Zhuowen a little anxious and worried. This was because he could not link this saintess in front of him to Mu Qinxue. He had already concluded that this woman was not Mu Qinxue at all. However, he still wanted to know who this woman was. Also, where was Mu Qinxue? I can't tell you that. The Phoenix people's saintess shook her head and replied coldly. Then do you know a woman named Mu Qinxue? Zhuowen asked anxiously. The Phoenix people's saintess paused for a moment. Her beautiful eyes suddenly narrowed, but she quickly replied calmly, I don't know her. At this moment, Zhuowen had already caught the change in the saintess's eyes. He was sure that this saintess had definitely heard of Mu Qinxue's name. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to have such a subtle change in expression just now. That change in expression was definitely not the change in expression of someone who did not know Mu Qinxue. It seems that you don't intend to tell me what your physique is. However, it doesn't matter. I will defeat you directly and then capture you alive. When the time comes, I will extract your soul and torture it until you tell me the truth. The Phoenix people's saintess formed a seal with her right hand and pointed at her glabella. A blazing white flame burst out from her glabella. Immediately, the flame condensed into a phoenix pattern on the surface of her glabella. Whoosh! The moment the phoenix pattern formed, it actually left the glabella of the Phoenix people's saintess and turned into a huge illusion of a phoenix spreading its wings and soaring high in the sky. A high-pitched phoenix cry resounded between heaven and earth. The illusion of the phoenix soared into the sky. Its huge phoenix eyes swept across heaven and earth with a sense of majesty and pride. Then the illusion of the phoenix let out another phoenix cry and immediately swooped down. It was not rushing toward Zhuowen, but the Phoenix people's saintess below. The huge illusion of the phoenix completely fell on the body of the Phoenix people's saintess. The surrounding air was swept away by waves of terrifying heat waves. The surrounding temperature rose by several times. The Phoenix people's saintess was like a phoenix reborn from the ashes. She slowly walked out of the endless flames. At this moment, the Phoenix people's saintess did not change much. The only change was that on her back a pair of huge phoenix wings that were hundreds of feet wide opened. They were so dazzling, so bright, and so breathtaking. The saintess has completely activated the power of the 99 phoenix body. This time the saintess is really serious. The alien with a human face and a tiger body had a serious expression. He stared at the Phoenix people's saintess with a pair of phoenix wings in the sky. His eyes were filled with reverence and worship. He was not the only one who felt that way. The entire alien race felt the same way. They all knelt on the ground and muttered in their own language. It was as if they were praying, but also as if they were giving their blessings. Oh no! The Phoenix people's saintess seems to have completely activated the power of her bloodline. Her strength has increased too much. I'm afraid Brother Long is in danger. Zhongli Haoyan stared blankly at the Phoenix People's Saintess with a pair of huge phoenix wings. She looked like a phoenix fairy descending to the world. It could be said that the terrifying aura of the Phoenix People's Saintess made her feel hopeless. She was really too powerful. She was so powerful that even at her peak, she could not summon up the will to resist. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were also trembling. The worry in their eyes became more and more intense. Yi Qidong, Sita Liangji, and the others all stepped back. Their eyes were filled with fear. Chapter 3036. Bloodline Boundary. The Saintess of the Phoenix clan gently stroked her burning hair. Her fiery red eyes looked at Zhuowen. She looked very seriously, as if she wanted to see through the aura of fear on his body. However, what surprised her was that the young man in front of her had no fear on his face. His eyes were as clear as water, and in the depths of those clear eyes, she could see a burning desire to fight. Yes, that's right, it was the desire to fight. Interesting. After I completely release the power of my bloodline and reach the state of transcendence, you can still remain so calm. Not bad. It's a pity that you're going to die soon. You're going to die under my power. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden spoke as if she was minding her own business. Her jade-like feet lightly tapped the void. Immediately, the void beneath her feet rippled like water. The Holy Maiden's movements were very elegant. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, her jade-like feet tapped the void. Then the entire space seemed to freeze. The freezing of space only lasted for a short while. Soon after, the space shattered, and the sound of something shattering could be heard. Behind the shattering sound, waves of flames surged. The surrounding flames were so magnificent, but also so terrifying and bone-piercing. The transparent void in Zhuowen's eyes had turned into an endless sea of flames. He was like a helpless person trapped in the sea of flames. In the endless sea of flames, the Holy Maiden's jade-like feet slowly stepped out. Her movements were graceful and slow, and the direction she was walking towards was exactly where Zhuowen was. Zhuowen only felt that the pressure around him was getting stronger and stronger. It was as if he had dived 10,000 meters into the vast ocean. The terrifying water pressure kept pressing down on his body, wanting to crush every inch of his flesh, blood, and bones. Is this a domain? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He did not struggle, but instead raised his head and looked at the Holy Maiden who was walking slowly towards him. I admire your calmness, but even so, you're going to die today. This is not a domain, but the boundary of my bloodline. Those who are within the boundary of my bloodline will not have freedom. Everything will be under my control. Longwen, your fate today is to be burned to death by this sea of flames, alone and helpless within my bloodline boundary. But you can be very proud today, because you're the first human to force me to use my bloodline boundary. Compared to Zhongli and Haoyan, I think you're the real #1 genius of the human race. The Holy Maiden was still walking. Although the distance between them was very short, she walked very slowly, as if she was deliberately dragging her feet. Before you die, you still have some value. I need to ask you some questions. Where did you hear the name Mu? She said coldly. Where? Zhuowen's heart throbbed when he saw the malevolence in the Holy Maiden's eyes. An unprecedented rage surged in his chest. This Holy Maiden knew about Mu Qinxue, but this Holy Maiden had hidden it from him. As for why she hid it, Zhuowen knew that Mu Qinxue's situation was not good. Chen Shui, where is she now? Zhuowen suppressed his anger and looked at the Holy Maiden's teasing eyes as he asked in a deep voice. You can't even protect yourself, but you're still in the mood to ask about Mu Qinxue. Also, you have to remember the primary and secondary relationship. I'm the one asking you now, not you asking me. Do you understand? The holy maiden finally arrived in front of Zhuowen, her eyes filled with teasing. "Can't protect myself? Are you sure?" A strange smile suddenly appeared on Zhuowen's face. Soon after, an even more vast and terrifying power began to surge from within his body. Zhuowen's body became even more crystal clear, and his aura became even more vast. Kacha! Zhuowen's aura continued to rise, from the early stage to the mid-stage of 6-star, and finally reached the late stage. That terrifying aura actually suppressed the Holy Maiden's aura after activating her bloodline. Even the Holy Maiden's bloodline boundary began to crack under this terrifying aura, shattering into countless pieces. The moment he broke through the bloodline boundary, Zhuowen's right fist pierced through the sky and slammed towards the Holy Maiden. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden clearly did not expect this to happen. She was still in a daze when she realized that Zhuowen's fist was already coming towards her. This fist was too terrifying. Just the fist pressure alone made her feel suffocated. If she was hit by this fist, she would definitely be seriously injured. Fortunately, the Holy Maiden's reaction was fast enough. The pair of giant phoenix wings on her back quickly closed, blocking in front of her and tightly wrapping her up. "It's just the wings of a mixed bird. You dare to act so fierce in front of me?" Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy and cold. The fist force completely landed on the wings. It was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. It actually directly blasted through the wings. The fist with a blazing white light penetrated the wings and finally landed on the chest of the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden. Countless fire plume scattered in the sky. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her whole body bent backward and fell downwards like a powerless butterfly. The moment the fist hit the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden, Zhuowen's heart palpitated slightly. He quickly came back to his senses. He bent his right knee and pressed down hard, rapidly falling downwards. Zhuowen naturally would not miss this opportunity to beat a drowning dog while it was down. However, the moment he was about to approach the Holy Maiden, the veil on her face fluttered in the wind, revealing the peerless appearance under the veil. Her appearance was so exquisite and so familiar. The moment Zhuowen saw her, his mind went blank and he lost all thoughts. At this moment, the Holy Maiden's beautiful eyes suddenly opened. Her bent wings closed again and separated from her back, turning into a giant wheel of fire. The wheel of fire roared and slammed into the chest of the dazed Zhuowen. Pucci! The wheel of fire was too terrifying. It was the most terrifying attack condensed by the wings of the phoenix. Zhuowen's chest was directly cut open, torn apart, smashed, and finally exploded into a cloud of blood. After the last attack, the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden's face became even paler, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She grabbed Zhuowen's spirit ring and did not want to stay here any longer. She immediately took out a fiery red escape talisman and crushed it. Her whole body turned into a fiery light and disappeared on the spot. She knew that this Zhuowen was dead for sure. Since she had obtained Zhuowen's spirit ring, there was no need for her to stay here any longer. On top of that, her injuries were far too severe. If she were to stay here any longer, it would be a real headache if the other humans were to launch a sneak attack on her. Chapter 3037. Long Wen's Tomb Boom. Zhuo Wen's badly damaged body fell from the sky. The sound of his body crashing into the ground was extremely heavy. The saintess of the Phoenix people had left, and the foreign races in the distance did not stay there any longer. Brother Long, Jiang Qixing, and Yao Xiangjuan shouted and immediately came to Zhuowen's side. Looking at Zhuowen's mutilated body, their hearts trembled and their eyes were filled with sadness. They realized that Zhuowen's body was terribly damaged. They also used their divine senses to check Zhuowen's divine soul and found that Zhuowen's divine soul was also fragmented and completely gone. They knew that Zhuowen had completely fallen. Zhongli Haoyan dragged her severely injured body and slowly walked over. Looking at Zhuowen's mutilated body, She could not help but close her beautiful eyes. There was a trace of sadness and confusion on her pretty face. Brother Long, why was he distracted at the last moment? Zhong Li Haoyan sighed and voiced the doubts in her heart. The moment Zhuowen unleashed the power of the late-stage, 5-star Pangus sacred body, it was as if the whole world had collapsed and the sky had become unreal. Zhong Li Haoyan could clearly feel how powerful and terrifying Zhuowen was at that time. She did not know that even the bloodline limit of the Phoenix People Saintess was crushed by Zhuowen's sudden burst of power. After Zhuowen unleashed such a terrifying power, the Phoenix People Saintess could not resist at all. Even the defense formed by the Phoenix Wings was broken. There was no doubt that the Phoenix People Saintess was no match for Zhuowen at that time. If Zhuowen had not been distracted at the last moment, the Phoenix People Saintess would not have been able to seize the opportunity to launch her strongest attack. Zhuowen would not have been ambushed by the Phoenix People Saintess and died directly. Zhong Li Haoyan's doubts were also the same as Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing's. They could not figure out why Zhuowen would be distracted at the most critical moment. Haoyan, our purpose in coming to the Door of Darkness was to obtain the ancestral witch's essence blood. Now that we have obtained it, we can leave. Yi Qidong walked forward and said to Zhong Li Haoyan. Zhong Li Haoyan frowned slightly and looked at Yi Qidong indifferently. She shook her head and said, "You guys go first. I owe Brother Long a favor, so I must take care of his funeral matters before I leave." Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji looked at each other, knowing that Zhong Li Haoyan was alienating them. Although they were displeased, there was nothing they could do. They bid farewell to Zhong Li, Haoyan, Jiang Qixing, and the others and left. Jiang Qixing looked at Yi Qidong's back as he left, his eyes slightly disappointed. Later, when the Phoenix People's Saintess revealed her true strength, they could not help except for Zhong Li Haoyan. However, they were all willing to stand up for Zhuowen and support him. If not for Zhuowen, then for Zhuowen's contribution of saving the human race, they should have made a statement. Unfortunately, Yi Qidong chose to stand by and watch in the end, so Jiang Qixing was quite disappointed in his good friend. "I've only met Brother Long once. You too are Brother Long's friends. What do you plan to do with his corpse? If you know Brother Long's origins, you can take his body back to his hometown and return to his roots." Zhong Li Haoyan's beautiful eyes looked at Zhuowen's body, then at Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan. "To be honest, although we are Brother Long's friends, we met in the Door of Darkness. I only know that he was a loose cultivator. As for his specific origins, we don't know anything at all." Jiang Qixing said a little awkwardly, "By the way, Ma Yujie is Brother Long's good friend. He knew Brother Long much longer than we did. Maybe he knows something?" Yao Xiangjuan suddenly said. Jiang Qixing's eyes were slightly gloomy as he sighed. "I think Ma Yujie has already slipped away. I don't know where he is now. And I tried to contact him with a communication talisman, but there was no reply. Obviously, that guy deliberately didn't reply to me." When Jiang Qixing said this, there was some hatred in his eyes. Obviously, he was unhappy with Ma Yujie's lack of loyalty. Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes darkened. Her thoughts were much more meticulous than Jiang Qixing's. In the process of interacting with Ma Yujie and Zhuowen, she noticed that there was always a faint hostility between Zhuowen and Ma Yujie. She knew that Ma Yujie was not necessarily Zhuowen's good friend. It was very likely that they were enemies. It was just that they entered the Door of Darkness with the same goal, so they cooperated to enter it together. Since Ma Yujie had already obtained his goal, it was naturally impossible for him to continue following Zhuowen. It was better to part ways as soon as possible. Zhong Li Haoyan looked disappointed. She said, "We don't even know Brother Long's origin. What should we do with his body?" "Cremate it first," Jiang Qixing said. "It seems that's the only way." Zhong Li Haoyan nodded. She immediately waved her sleeve and summoned a divine fire that enveloped Zhuowen's body. However, Zhongli Haoyan soon discovered that Zhuowen's body was not damaged at all under the divine fire. It still shone with a sparkling light, but it was much dimmer than before. What a powerful body! My divine fire can't burn Brother Long's body at all, Zhongli Haoyan said in surprise. Jiang Qixing and Yao Shangjuan were also shocked, but they quickly recovered. No wonder Brother Long dared to fight the Phoenix People's Saintess, who activated the 99 Phoenix body. It turns out that his body is not simple. With the strength of Brother Long's body, I'm afraid many foreign races can't compare to it. Jiang Qixing clicked his tongue in wonder. He looked at Zhuowen's body and couldn't help but murmur in admiration. Zhongli Haoyan put away her divine fire and looked at Zhuowen's body that was still intact. She said, helplessly, "My divine fire can't do anything to Brother Long's body. It's obviously impossible to cremate it. There's no need to cremate it. Let's just bury Brother Long's body here. This is the deepest part of the door of darkness, and it's also the place where ancestor Shaman Gonggong's body is kept. Not many people can enter this place, so Brother Long won't be disturbed if he's buried here," Yao Shangjuan said in a deep voice. Jiang Qixing and Zhongli Haoyan glanced at Yao Shangjuan and nodded. They agreed with Yao Shangjuan's suggestion. In terms of quietness, this was indeed a good place to be buried. After all, even an ancestor shaman like Gonggong chose this place. It was obvious that the feng shui here was excellent. After the three of them decided, they found a better area around the sorcerer god's altar, dug a hole, and placed Zhuowen's body in it. After the grave was done, the three of them erected a tombstone in front of Zhuowen's grave and wrote the words Tomb of Dragon Rune. Chapter 3038. Deep in thought not long after Zhongli Haoyan and the others left, Zhuowen's grave suddenly broke open, and a hand reached out from the grave. Then a figure slowly crawled out of the grave. Cough, cough! This figure was Zhuowen. Zhuowen coughed a few times, then lay on his back and looked at the empty sky above. At this moment, Zhuowen's body was almost cut in half. The huge wound extended from his right shoulder to the left side of his abdomen, and blood was constantly gushing out from the huge wound. However, Zhuowen's body was constantly emitting a faint green light. Under the cover of this green light, Zhuowen's injury was under control and gradually began to recover, but the recovery was very slow. Damn it, the fire will manifested by the phoenix wings is so terrifying. It almost killed me. Zhuowen looked at the slow recovery speed of his body and couldn't help but curse secretly. His Pangu's sacred body was integrated with the Gomang parasite, and the latter was a parasite that focused on healing energy. Ordinary injuries could be healed instantly. However, the moment Zhuowen was hit by the fire wheel of the phoenix wings, Zhuowen felt that he had lost control of his body, and his consciousness had completely disappeared in that time and space. However, before his consciousness collapsed, Zhuowen timely put his original body into the great world. It could be said that at that moment, the doppelganger had indeed died, and even the doppelganger's divine soul had been destroyed. However, since his original body was fine, he could naturally use his divine soul to awaken the energy of the Gomang parasite in the doppelganger and begin to heal the doppelganger's damaged body. However, the doppelganger's degree of damage was too serious, and the fire wheel of the phoenix wings was extremely high in energy, so the effect of his recovery was greatly reduced. The doppelganger sat cross-legged not far from the sorcerer god's altar and began to silently heal his injuries. The great world turned into a speck of dust and fell on the doppelganger's shoulder. His original body was in the great world and was lost in thought. Zhuowen remembered the moment when the Phoenix people's saintess veil fluttered and her face was seen. He was 100% sure that it was Mu Qinshua's face. However, other than her face, her temperament, demeanor, and eyes were completely different from the Mu Qinshua in his impression. The two of them were not the same person. It was at that moment that Zhuowen saw Mu Qinshua's face. That was why Zhuowen's heart palpitated and he was distracted. allowing the saintess to find a flaw. However, now that Zhuowen thought about it, he was sure that it was not the real Mu Qinxue, and he also paid attention to some details. Although the Holy Maiden's appearance was very similar to Mu Qinxue's, in retrospect, there were still some differences in some details. After all, if Mu Qinxue really appeared in front of him, even if she was wearing a veil, Zhuowen could easily recognize her. As for this saintess, even if she took off her veil, she still gave Zhuowen a strange feeling that was hard to describe. That Phoenix People saintess is definitely not Qinxue. Zhuowen came to this conclusion. His eyes were cold, but he knew that the Phoenix People saintess definitely knew where Mu Qinxue was. Otherwise, when he mentioned Mu Qinxue before, this Phoenix People saintess would not have lost her composure, even asking him why he knew Mu Qinxue's name. Also, after Zhuowen's clone was destroyed, Zhuowen could have used his main body's soul to activate the Gomang-gu in the clone to restore it. However, Zhuowen did not do this. He waited for Zhong Li and Hao Yan to bury the clone's body and leave before he began to restore the clone's body. He only had one goal in doing this, which was to let everyone think that he, Longwen, had died. Zhuowen was very clear that if he did not die, the news of him obtaining the ancestral, which Gonggong, would be spread. Then, when he left the door of darkness, he would be faced with an endless pursuit. Now that he, the Longwen in name, had died in the hands of the Phoenix People Saintess, and his spirit ring had been taken away by the Phoenix People Saintess, he knew that everyone's eyes would no longer be on a dead person like him, but rather the Phoenix People Saintess. This was what Zhuowen thought when his clone was killed by the Phoenix People's Saintess sneak attack. I have to return to the outside world first. That Phoenix People's Saintess should soon realize that there is nothing in my spirit ring. I'm afraid she will come back here again. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely serious. He waved his sleeve and swept away all the tombstones erected by Zhong Li and Hao Yan beside the sorcerer god's altar. After making sure that there were no other traces left behind, his clone went into the outside world. The outside world turned into an inconspicuous speck of dust and drifted towards the outside world in an orderly manner. Sure enough, not long after Zhuowen left, a fiery red figure returned to the sorcerer god's altar. After the fiery red figure carefully searched the surroundings of the sorcerer god's altar and did not find anything else, she said hatefully, "Longwen, how dare you set me up? If I see you again, I will never forgive you." This fiery red figure was naturally the Phoenix People's saintess who had returned. Moreover, this saintess had brought a group of people with her. Among them, the person with a human face and a tiger's body followed the saintess closely with a fawning smile on his face. "Saintess, if what you said is right, and there is really nothing in Longwen's spirit ring, then where would Longwen place the inheritance of the sorcerer ancestor, Gonggong?" The person with a human face and a tiger's body asked with flickering eyes. The Phoenix People's saintess coldly glanced at the person with a human face and a tiger's body and said, "Are you saying that you suspect that I am lying?" "I wouldn't dare. Saintess, you are born with the 9-9 Phoenix body. You are the #1 genius of the Phoenix People and a world-renowned genius in the primitive heaven realm. Only you, Saintess, are qualified to inherit the inheritance of the sorcerer ancestor, Gonggong. You are the most suitable person to inherit the inheritance. How could I dare to have any objections?" The person with a human face and a tiger's body trembled as he hurriedly bent down and explained with trembling jaws. "Humph. It would be fine if I got the inheritance, but I didn't. It was Longwen who set a trap for me to fall into. You guys continue to search here and see if you can find Longwen," the saintess of the Phoenix People said coldly. The person with a human face and a tiger's body and the other people did not dare to disobey the saintess's order. They hurriedly cupped their hands, nodded and bowed as they agreed. Then they began to search around the sorcerer god's altar. However, after searching for a while, they all returned in disappointment and shook their heads at the saintess. Let's go back first. Although Longwen is dead, and the inheritance is not in his spirit ring. There is only one possibility. This person gave the inheritance to someone else in advance, and it is very likely that it was his two friends. The saintess of the Phoenix people narrowed her eyes as she thought of Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. She remembered that these two people seemed to have a good relationship with Zhuowen. If she guessed correctly, then Longwen must have given the important thing to one of these two people. Chapter 3039. The alien tribes attacked Zhuowen, hid in the Great World, and did not go far. The Great World had turned into dust and was floating at the edge of the sorcerer god's altar. Zhuowen naturally heard the Phoenix people's saintess actions and words clearly, especially when Zhuowen heard that the Phoenix people's saintess wanted to find Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. His gaze became extremely cold. However, Zhuowen did not rush out of the Great World. After all, his injuries had not fully healed and were still recovering. If he rushed out now, the Phoenix people's saintess and the alien tribe would attack together. Even if Zhuowen had 10 lives, he would not be able to survive. After the Phoenix people's saintess and the alien tribe left, Zhuowen stayed in the Great World for a full 3 days. After using up almost a fifth of the Great World's resources, he barely recovered from his injuries. Whoosh! In the silent sorcerer god's altar square, a white light flashed from an inconspicuous speck of dust. Then a figure appeared in the square. Zhuowen kept the Great World. His original body was still in the Great World. He was now in the form of a clone. It's time to go back. But before I go back, I need to change my appearance again. Zhuowen muttered to himself. His face began to distort. Finally, he changed from a youth with a scar to a fair-skinned, pretty boy with rosy lips and white teeth. After changing his appearance, Zhuowen followed his memory and began to leave this place. The moment he entered the door of darkness, he had already prepared a map of the route he would take. In other words, most cultivators would draw their own route when they entered such a dangerous place. This was to prevent them from being unable to find their way back. On the way back, Zhuowen naturally encountered some obstructions. However, to the current him, these obstructions were not worth mentioning. After leaving the gear zone, Zhuowen returned to the Great World. Zhuowen was about to follow the route he had recorded and return when the Gong Goo worm in his body became restless. Zhuowen had no choice but to release the Gong Goo worm. After fusing with the Gong Goo worm, Zhuowen's control of the water element had reached an extremely abnormal level. The water element even had a miraculous effect on healing injuries. The Gong Goo worm and the Gomong Goo worm's abilities complemented each other. Now, Zhuowen's self-healing ability was even stronger than before. At this moment, the Gong Goo worm was constantly screaming in his hand, its head in a very human-like manner. Zhuowen glanced in that direction. It wasn't the way back, but in another direction. You want me to go in that direction? There's another exit there? Although Zhuowen's Gong Goo worm, he already knew the Gong Goo worm. After all, after fusing with the Gong Goo worm, he could clearly understand the former's consciousness. Thinking that the Gong Goo worm had been with the Gong Goo worm for a long time, and this was the tomb that the Gong Goo worm had prepared for him, Zhuowen naturally chose to believe in the Gong Goo worm. After deciding on the direction, Zhuowen rushed in that direction. Along the way, Zhuowen basically did not see any other cultivators. He knew that most of the cultivators should know that the Gong Goo's inheritance had been taken away. Obviously, they did not want to continue staying here. Even though there might be many good things hidden here, there were also many dangers. Who knew if they would enter some terrifying danger zone in the next moment and then die? Soon, Zhuowen arrived at the end. He found that there was actually a short mountain at the end. This short mountain was very unremarkable. It was bare without even weeds. Zhuowen circled around the short mountain and stopped at the back of the short mountain. He saw a mottled white formation at the back of the short mountain. This formation looked like it was drawn with chalk. It did not feel real. It's a teleportation formation. This formation was drawn with an ancient method. Zhuowen could only tell that this formation was a teleportation formation. As for the rest, he really could not tell. Zhuowen took out a high-grade Heavenly Path origin crystal and placed it on the formation. Then he formed a seal with both hands. The formation was activated, and Zhuowen disappeared from the formation. When Zhuowen opened his eyes, what entered his eyes was an unfamiliar scene. He was in a ruin. He was not unfamiliar with this ruin. It was one of the countless ruins in the dark ancient city. The aura here was too familiar to him. Looks like I've left the door of darkness. This looks like the periphery of the dark ancient city. Zhuowen looked around. The confusion in his eyes quickly faded. He thought that he would be directly teleported outside the door of darkness. Now, it seemed that he was overthinking. Zhuowen was about to leave the ruins and go to the door of darkness to take a look when he smelled blood in the corner of the ruins. Then he saw 5 corpses lying in the southeast corner of the ruins. Among the 5 corpses, 1 belonged to a foreign race, while the other 4 belonged to the human clan. From the wide-open eyes of the 4 corpses, Zhuowen could tell that the 4 humans must have seen something unbelievable before they died. On the other hand, the foreign race corpse's face was full of indifference. Although it had fallen, there was a trace of fanaticism on its face. He knew that this was the last expression the foreign race showed before they died. Strange. The human clan and the foreign race should have formed a temporary alliance in the dark ancient city. Why would they suddenly kill each other? Zhuowen looked at the 5 corpses. He knew that the 4 humans must have died together with the foreign race corpse. Although the foreign race had united to kill the human clan team in the Door of Darkness, it was the foreign race who had betrayed them first. However, outside the Door of Darkness, there were high-level experts of both the human clan and the foreign race stationed there. If a battle broke out, it would not just disappear. It would probably cause a huge uproar. The battle would definitely be terrifying. Before obtaining the ancestral witch's blood essence, how could the human clan and the foreign race easily start a war? Unless the human clan knew that the ancestral witch Gongong's inheritance had been obtained by the Phoenix People Saintess, and the human clan had obtained several bottles of ancestral witch's blood essence. This made the 2 sides feel unbalanced, so they started a war without regard for anything else. This person's communication jade talisman is ringing. Let's see what it is. Zhuowen realized that things might not have happened as he had imagined. When the communication jade talisman on the waist of one of the human corpses lit up, he immediately took it. Putting down the communication jade talisman, Zhuowen's expression became very serious. He finally knew that the human clan and the foreign race had suddenly started a war in the dark ancient city. In other words, the war between the human clan and the foreign race in the dark ancient city was only the tip of the iceberg. This was because the 10 major races of the foreign race had united again. When the human clan and the foreign race were searching for ancestral, witch Gongong's corpse, they had once again appeared on the Starry Sky battlefield and launched a general attack on the human clan's Starry Sky Tower. Chapter 3040. Returning to the Door of Darkness, put away the jade talisman with a grave expression. He was a little surprised that the 10 great races of the primitive heavenly realm had joined forces to attack the human race's Starry Sky Tower again. He remembered that the primitive heavenly realm had done this tens of thousands of years ago, but only half of the 10 great races of the primitive heavenly realm had been mobilized. However, he could tell from the message in the jade talisman that the 10 great races of the primitive heavenly realm had all been mobilized. Their military strength was several times that of the war tens of thousands of years ago, and there were even more experts from the primitive heavenly realm who had joined the invasion this time. From the anxious tone of the message in the jade talisman, it could be seen that the situation at the Starry Sky Tower was not good. Zhuowen's gaze was gloomy. He did not expect that so many changes would happen in the outside world not long after he entered the Door of Darkness. It could be described as a complete upheaval. I wonder how Brother Jiang and junior sister Yao are doing? Zhuowen frowned slightly as he thought of Jiang Qixing, and Yao Xiangjuan. According to the speed of their return, they should not have completely left the door of darkness yet. Although Zhuowen had been delayed for 3 days at the sorcerer god's altar to heal his injuries, he had taken a shortcut under the guidance of the Gong parasite and left the range of the door of darkness effortlessly. However, the others were not as lucky as Zhuowen. They had to return the way they came. Although it was not as difficult as when they first entered the door of darkness, it would take at least 10 days to half a month to completely return to the door of darkness. Only 3 or 4 days had passed. Obviously, Zhong, Li, Haoyan, Yi Qidong, and the saintess of the Phoenix people should still be on their way out of the door of darkness. The 10 great races have joined forces to attack the Starry Sky Tower. This is not a small matter. I'm afraid that the human race and the alien race at the door of darkness have already started fighting. Zhuowen's gaze was gloomy. He knew that the entrance of the door of darkness was no longer a good place. Under normal circumstances, Zhuowen would definitely not return to the door of darkness and walk right into the trap. However, Zhuowen was still worried about Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan, as well as Zhongli Haoyan. Although he had only met her once, Zhuowen admired Zhongli Haoyan's character and moral character. Zhuowen also approved of Zhong, Li, and Haoyan as friends. Sigh. Sometimes I really feel like I'm a great saint. He's too loyal. Zhuowen laughed bitterly at himself. He shook his head and headed towards the door of darkness in the depths of the ancient city of darkness. He was still worried about Jiang Qixing, Yao Xiangjuan, and the others, so he decided to go to the door of darkness to check on the situation. Right now, the dark ancient city was exceptionally quiet. It was a deathly silence, which was a great contrast to the scene when the human race and the non-human race had come to explore. On the way to the dark gate, Zhuowen saw all kinds of ruins along the way, as well as the corpses of humans and aliens scattered on the ruins of the dark ancient city. However, overall, there were more human corpses than alien corpses. From the condition of these corpses, Zhuowen guessed that the sudden war between the human race and the alien race should have happened 4 or 5 days ago. Coincidentally, it happened to be the time when the alien race joined forces to encircle and annihilate the human race inside the door of darkness. It seemed that at that time the alien race outside had already sent an army to invade the human race. The closer he got to the door of darkness, the more human and alien corpses he saw. They were not scattered, but floating in batches. Zhuowen was very vigilant. His speed was not fast, but he was unusually cautious. Like a black leopard hunting at night, he tried his best to hide and not let himself be exposed. 10 days later, Zhuowen landed in the ruins closest to the door of darkness. He restrained his aura, and his eyes were unprecedentedly dignified. The ruins were almost completely broken, and the damage was very serious. From the huge gullies and ruins, Zhuowen could see that these damages should have been caused recently. He could also feel a biting, cold, killing intent from these damaged parts. These killing intents should have been left behind by the people who had fought in the past. There were too many corpses in the ruins, almost piled up into a small mountain. He even saw some familiar faces among these corpses. They were all cultivators he had seen in the human and alien race teams at the door of darkness. The moment Zhuowen landed in the ruins, he had already used his divine sense to scan the ruins. There were no living people in the ruins, only dead people. He could have continued to move forward and go to the door of darkness, but he did not. This was because the moment he arrived near the ruins, he felt a terrifying battle fluctuation. He was sure that the battle fluctuation should have come from the door of darkness in front of him. Zhuowen's heart sank. He knew that there was a great battle at the entrance of the door of darkness. Without thinking, he knew that it should be a battle between the supreme experts of the human race and the alien race. Although the ruins were the closest to the door of darkness, the actual distance was not short. With Zhuowen's speed, it should take about an hour to reach the door of darkness from here. However, the battle fluctuation could be transmitted so far away. One could imagine how terrifying the battle near the door of darkness was. Zhuowen's eyes flashed, but he still decided to go over and take a look. Of course, he could not just go over like this. The probability of being discovered was too high. As long as I escape into the space-time tunnel, then use the art of heavenly divination to change the fate aura on my body. As long as I don't expose myself and silently observe in the space-time tunnel, it will not be so easy for an early-stage master to discover me. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice, then used the power of space-time to escape into the space-time tunnel. He escaped into the deepest and most complicated space-time tunnel, and used the art of heavenly divination to conceal the fate aura on his body. The speed of the space-time tunnel was far faster than the outside world. Zhuowen only took a few steps and arrived not far from the door of darkness. Zhuowen stood silently in the space-time tunnel, silently observing the outside world through the information transmitted by space-time. Soon, he found that not far from the door of darkness, there were two groups of people fighting to the death. These two groups were naturally the human side and the foreign side. With a single glance, Zhuowen could tell that these two groups of humans and outsiders were the ones who had entered the door of darkness. However, the number of humans and foreign side was much smaller than before he had entered the door of darkness. Zhuowen knew that those who were missing had basically all died in battle. On the human side, Senki Yin, Xiangpuyu, and Xiaojin were all present. The three of them were early-stage master, leaders of Dao Palace forces, and their strength was unfathomable. In addition, Zhuowen discovered that an ordinary-looking old man erupted with an aura that was not the slightest bit weaker than Senki Yin's group. Clearly, this ordinary-looking old man was also a master of heaven's transcendence realm. Chapter 3041. The great Battle. Zhuowen remembered that when Zhongli Haoyan had first arrived at the door of darkness, she had addressed this elder as Elder Zhong. Zhuowen couldn't help but sigh at the heavenly temple's foundation. With a single glance, he could tell that Elder Zhong wasn't the temple master of the heavenly temple. Instead, he was here to act as Zhongli Haoyan's bodyguard. Since he was also an early-stage transcending heaven master, didn't that mean that the heavenly temple had more than one transcending heaven master powerhouse? It seemed that the heavenly temple's reputation as the number one Dao Palace faction in the Xianmi Sky domain wasn't undeserved. The other Dao Palace factions paled in comparison. At the very least, Zhuowen had seen many Dao Palace factions, and most of them only had one early-stage transcending heaven master powerhouse. Moreover, the 10 Extremities Incorp sect had never had a transcending heaven master powerhouse before. If Senki Yin hadn't been lucky enough to break through, the 10 Extremities Incorp sect would have been at the bottom of the Dao Palace factions. At this moment, Senki Yin, Xiangpuyu, and Xiaojin had joined forces and were fighting against a figure whose entire body was covered in blazing flames. What surprised Zhuowen was that the three early-stage transcending heaven masters, Senki Yin and Xiangpuyu, weren't able to gain the upper hand in a 3-on-1 battle. On the contrary, Senki Yin and the other two were at a disadvantage. That burning figure was too terrifying. Every move he made seemed to contain the power to destroy the heavens and earth. Zhuowen naturally saw the true face of that burning figure. It was the second elder of the Phoenix people. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely solemn. This second elder of the Phoenix people was also an early-stage transcending heaven master, but he wasn't far from the mid-stage. Moreover, this old fellow's bloodline was very powerful. The blood of the Phoenix flowed through his veins. Although he couldn't compare to the Phoenix people's holy maiden, he was already a high-level existence among the Phoenix people. Relying on his cultivation realm and bloodline, this second elder's strength far exceeded that of an early-stage transcending heaven master. This was also the final reason why Senki Yin and the other two were still at a disadvantage when fighting against the two elders. On the other side of the battlefield was the battle between Elder Zhong of the Heavenly Temple and a mermaid. This merman was abnormally tall, much taller than Sauron and Moses. Just his height alone was at least 10 feet. Furthermore, this merman's entire body was covered with ferocious spikes. As these spikes danced, they emitted a chilling light that could shake one's soul. Zhuowen could sense that this merman's aura was far stronger than MDA's. He was actually also an early-stage Heavenly Master expert. Zhuowen noticed MDA not far away. When he looked at the merman, his eyes were filled with respect and fanaticism. He knew that this merman was most likely in existence on the level of the merman race's patriarch. Before entering the door of darkness, Zhuowen did not see the mermaid. Clearly, the mermaid had come after they entered the door of darkness. On the other side, there were only 2 early-stage Heavenly Master experts, but they were enough to match the 4 early-stage Heavenly Master experts of the human race. In addition to the high-level battle between these 2 sides, the human race and the other race were also fighting. Although the human race outnumbered the other race, the human race was being suppressed by the other race. After all, the other race's overall quality was much stronger than that of the human race. In the same realm, the other race could fight 3 people at once. Unless the human race outnumbered the other race by 3 times, the result was destined to be defeated. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He was hesitating whether to make a move at this moment. Speaking of which, his purpose in returning to the door of darkness was to take away his 2 good friends, Jiang Qixing and Yao Shangjuan. As for Zhongli Haoyan, she had an early-stage Heavenly Master expert as her bodyguard, so Zhuowen was not worried about her safety. If he made a move now, he would expose his identity. At that time, it would not be so easy to take away Jiang Qixing and Yao Shangjuan. Just as Zhuowen was hesitating, ripples appeared on the surface of the door of darkness, which had been motionless all this time. Immediately, more than a dozen figures appeared from the ripples. Leading them were 2 young men. Zhuowen was not unfamiliar with these 2 young men. They were Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji, who had watched with folded arms at the sorcerer god's altar. Zhuowen did not have a good impression of the 2 of them, but he did not have any bad feelings either. Although the 2 of them had maintained a neutral attitude when Zhuowen had faced the Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people, Zhuowen knew that most people would have made the same choice as Yi Qidong and Situ Liangji. After all, he was not familiar with the 2 of them. He did not have the charisma to take the initiative to make others sacrifice their lives for him. However, Zhongli Haoyan was an exception. Just because he had given her his essence blood, she was willing to sacrifice her life to repay his kindness. This made Zhuowen have a good impression of her. The moment Yi Qidong, Sita Liangji, and the others appeared at the entrance of the door of darkness, they immediately saw the scene of the battle at the entrance and could not help but be stunned. Yi Qidong, Sita Liangji, quickly returned to the team and helped the team repel the foreign races. Senki Yin immediately noticed Yi Qidong and the others and hurriedly transmitted his voice to Yi Qidong and Sita Liangji. The 2 of them quickly realized that Lian Meng had broken off the relationship between the human race and the foreign races. Now they had to join the battle and repel the foreign races. Otherwise, they would have no way to survive. The cultivators sent into the door of darkness were not weak. On the contrary, their strength and talent far surpassed their peers. Therefore, after receiving Senki Yin's transmission, they immediately joined the team of the human race that was still fighting and helped the human race resist the foreign races. The Scarlet Mountain Villa behind Yi Qidong was the #1 Dao Palace faction in the host region. The master of the Scarlet Mountain Villa was also an early-stage sky-reaching master. However, he did not come to the door of darkness this time and only sent a creation master to protect Yi Qidong. There were still many people like Yi Qidong on the human race's side. As the leaders of Dao Palace factions, they were usually busy cultivating in seclusion or dealing with other important matters and had very little time to spare. Although the matter of ancestral shaman Gonggong this time was important, it was not to the extent that these Dao Palace bigwigs would go crazy. Therefore, only the 10 extremities Yin Corpse sect, Yin and Yang Divine sect, and Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower had personally come. The rest of the Dao Palace faction leaders had sent other experts to accompany their geniuses. With the addition of Yi Qidong and the others, the human race's decline immediately slowed down a lot. However, the foreign races still had the advantage, but the human race was not suppressed like before. In the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen silently observed and saw that Yao Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing had not come out. He also did not make any moves. Speaking of which, he had not come to the door of darkness to take Jiang Qixing and Yao Shangjuan away. His main purpose was to confirm whether they could return safely. If he confirmed that they were safe, Zhuowen naturally did not plan to appear. Chapter 3042. Unrelenting after waiting for a while, another ripple appeared from the door of darkness, and 3 figures appeared. Zhuowen's eyes lit up when he saw the 3 figures. They were the people he was waiting for: Yao Shangjuan, Jiang Qixing, and Zhongli Haoyan. Zhongli Haoyan's face was still pale, but her aura was much more stable than before. Her injuries should have improved. After all, Zhongli Haoyan was the strongest prodigy of the heavenly sacred temple. She should have no lack of top-grade divine pills on her. Her injuries had probably healed so quickly because she had consumed a top-grade divine pill. However, Zhongli Haoyan and Yao Shangjuan didn't look too good, and they were a little anxious. After appearing in the door of darkness, they immediately took out their flying divine artifacts and fled. The humans were all pleasantly surprised when they saw Zhongli Haoyan come out. Among them, Elder Zhong, who was engaged in a fierce battle with the merman, finally relaxed his frown. But soon his expression changed slightly because he noticed the strange expression on Zhongli Haoyan's face. Sure enough, he took out his flying divine artifact and fled the moment he saw Zhongli Haoyan come out. Unfortunately, as soon as the flying divine artifact flew out, a huge flaming hand suddenly shot out from the door of darkness. The flaming hand grabbed the tail of Zhongli Haoyan's flying divine artifact in its hand. The flying divine artifact's forward momentum was immediately stopped. Sizzle! Sizzle! The blazing flames on the flaming hand surged, and the scorching heat started to melt Zhongli Haoyan's flying divine artifact. An incredulous look appeared on Zhongli Haoyan's face. Her flying divine tool wasn't of a particularly high grade, but it was still a god of creation stage flying divine tool. There were many spell formations and restrictions within it, and it had been refined from many precious materials, so it was extraordinarily sturdy. But now, the flying divine artifact couldn't withstand the heat of the flaming hand and started to melt. It was unbelievable. Do you really think you can escape? A proud female voice sounded from inside the door of darkness. The door of darkness rippled violently again, and the Phoenix People's holy maiden appeared at the entrance of the door of darkness with more than 10 alien races. The Phoenix People's holy maiden stared coldly at Zhongli Haoyan in the air. She grabbed at the air with her right hand, and the flaming hand started to pull. Crack! The flying divine artifact instantly shattered into countless flaming fragments. Zhongli Haoyan's eyes narrowed. She gritted her teeth and took out a golden talisman. The golden rune engraved on the golden talisman burst out with a blazing golden light. Immediately, it turned into a golden stream of light. It was like a golden river hanging high in the sky. It flowed against the current and blocked the giant flaming hand behind it. Bam, 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 bam. I told you that you can escape. The Phoenix People's holy maiden wasn't particularly surprised that the flaming hand was blocked. Golden flames started to dance in her beautiful eyes. The flaming hand had changed completely. It had turned from a scarlet red to a golden color. Its power had also skyrocketed in an instant, suppressing the golden river in one fell swoop. The golden river was torn apart, and the flaming hand swept out as if it had teleported. It instantly closed in on Zhongli Haoyan and the others. The flaming hand was too terrifying. If the 3 of them were to be hit by it, they would be severely injured, even if they didn't die. Zhongli Haoyan and the others' expressions changed drastically. They knew that they could only take it head-on. The flaming hand was too fast, and it was too late to dodge. The two of you run. I'll stop the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden. As long as you return to the human team, the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden won't dare to charge into the human team alone. Zhongli Haoyan pushed Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing, who were still in shock, toward the human team. She then turned around with a determined look in her beautiful eyes. You're courting death. You weren't my match when you weren't injured. Now that you're injured, do you think you'll be my match? You're overestimating yourself. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden sneered coldly. She glanced at the dozen or so aliens behind her. The aliens understood the meaning of the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden's gaze. They nodded and rushed out. Their targets were Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan, who were pushed away by Zhongli Haoyan. Zhongli Haoyan also realized the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden's intention. Her expression changed slightly, and she planned to return to block the aliens. Unfortunately, the terrifying golden flaming hand had already arrived in front of her. The temperature was so high that it seemed as if even the space around it would evaporate. Zhongli Haoyan could only face it seriously. Otherwise, she might die at the hands of the flaming hand. Zhongli Haoyan took out several talismans of different colors. They formed several different colored barriers in front of her. They barely blocked the flaming hand. However, looking at Zhongli Haoyan's tottering body, it seemed that she was barely able to block it. She probably wouldn't be able to block it for long. Holy Maiden, your strength isn't as strong as before. Your injuries are more serious than mine, aren't they? If Brother Long hadn't shown mercy at the last moment, would you still be alive? Zhongli Haoyan mocked. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden's beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent. She looked coldly at Zhongli Haoyan as if someone had caught her sore spot. She said coldly, "It seems like you're really courting death." As she spoke, the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden formed a seal with her jade-like hands. Suddenly, the flaming hand became even more terrifying. Its flames were ferocious, and the temperature became even more terrifying. To the Holy Maiden, the battle with Longwen was an unerasable humiliation. Although she was very curious as to why Longwen was distracted at the last moment, she still trembled with fear when she thought of that battle. That time, she really felt that she was in a life-threatening danger. Zhongli Haoyan immediately felt the pressure. Her pure white forehead was covered with fine sweat. Not far away, Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing were blocked by more than a dozen foreign races, blocking their way. These foreign races were all very strong. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing were instantly at a disadvantage when they worked together. They were tottering as if they would be defeated at any time. Young Miss. Old Zhong, who was originally entangled with the leader of the Merfolk tribe, saw that Zhongli Haoyan was on the verge of collapsing under the giant, golden flaming hand. His expression changed slightly as he pushed the leader of the Merfolk tribe back with a palm strike. Then he rushed towards Zhongli Haoyan in an attempt to rescue her. You want to leave? It won't be that easy. Chapter 3043. Explosive Enlightenment Divine. Pill the wind from the fist whistled and arrived in front of Elder Zhong in an instant. Elder Zhong's expression changed slightly. His gaze was gloomy as he struck out with his right palm. It collided violently with the leader of the Merfolk clan. Terrifying ripples spread out, shattering the surrounding space into dust. Get lost! Elder Zhong roared angrily. Unfortunately, the merman leader smiled and did not have the slightest intention of leaving. Old man, if you want me to get lost, then defeat me. You haven't even defeated me, yet you're telling me this. Don't you think it's funny? The merman leader sneered. Elder Zhong was silent, but the killing intent in his eyes was shocking and even terrifying. You're the one who forced me to do this. Elder Zhong took out a scarlet divine pill and swallowed it. Immediately, a bloody mist erupted from Elder Zhong's body. Streaks of blood appeared on the surface of Elder Zhong's skin. His aura suddenly became extremely terrifying, many times stronger than before. Elder Zhong's shriveled face was now covered with streaks of blood. He looked very ferocious and terrifying, like a murderous demon that had come out from a pile of corpses. The merman leader's expression changed drastically. He stared at Elder Zhong, who had undergone a tremendous transformation. He could not help but step back and put some distance between himself and Elder Zhong. He looked at the latter in fear. What kind of divine pill did this old man take? His aura is too terrifying. He's almost at the peak of the early stage of Heaven Ascension Master. I'm afraid he's not far from the middle stage of Heaven Ascension Master. The merman leader's expression did not look good. He looked at Elder Zhong with vigilance. He could feel the latter's strong sense of danger. Elder Zhong's sudden burst of terrifying aura immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding humans and foreign races. In particular, Senki Yin, Xiang Puyu, and Xiao Jin, and the two elders of the Phoenix people were also attracted by Elder Zhong's battle. This old man took the explosive enlightenment divine pill. What a crazy old man! Senki Yin's eyes flickered. Xiang Puyu and Xiao Jin also looked serious. They naturally knew about the explosive enlightenment divine pill. It was a fortune-grade divine pill. Its only use was to stimulate the potential in a cultivator's body, instantly erupting with more power. However, the duration of this burst awakening divine pill was not long, and the side effects were huge. Because after using this explosive awakening elixir, one's cultivation level would drop. Elder Zhong was an early master of Heaven Ascension, but after taking the explosive awakening divine pill, he would gain unprecedented power, but at the same time his cultivation level would drop from the early master of Heaven Ascension. Die for this old man. Elder Zhong was like an awakened lion. He took a step forward, causing the air to explode and space to distort. He disappeared from where he stood as if he had teleported. When Elder Zhong appeared again, he was already in front of the merfolk leader. His right hand formed a palm and pressed against the merfolk leader's chest as if he had teleported. So fast! This was the only thought in the merman leader's mind. He only had time to cross his arms in front of his chest before the palm came crashing down. Kacha! The merman leader's eyes widened. His arms seemed to have been broken by a huge force. His body flew out involuntarily like a falling leaf, lonely and helpless. Whoosh! Before the merfolk leader could react from his melancholy, Elder Zhong's figure appeared in front of him again. Elder Zhong was expressionless. He lifted his right leg and smashed it down, hitting the merfolk leader's chest. The merfolk leader spat out a mouthful of blood and fell from the sky, crashing onto the ground. The entire ground shook. After Elder Zhong did this, he did not care about the merfolk leader who had been smashed to the ground by him. He took a step forward and rushed toward Zhongli Haoyan. At this moment, the barrier created by Zhongli Haoyan began to crack. It was on the verge of collapsing, as if it would shatter at any moment. Zhongli Haoyan's face was pale, and her delicate body was trembling. She probably could not hold on for much longer. Zhongli Haoyan naturally saw the battle on Elder Zhong's side. When Elder Zhong rushed over, she was pleasantly surprised. Elder Zhong, help me save my friends first. Come and save me later. Zhongli Haoyan hurriedly pointed at Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing as she transmitted her voice to Elder Zhong. Elder Zhong was startled, but he immediately shook his head and rushed toward Zhongli Haoyan. He directly passed by Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan, who were still struggling and could be taken down by the foreign races at any time. Zhongli Haoyan's beautiful eyes showed a trace of hatred. She hurriedly transmitted her voice again. Elder Zhong, it's easy for you to save them. Elder Zhong sighed and shook his head. Miss, it's too late. If I save them, you may die. I will not allow this to happen. Elder Zhong's eyes were clear. He instantly rushed in front of Zhongli Haoyan. With a wave of his sleeve, the terrifying golden flame hand instantly dissipated. The Phoenix people's saintess groaned. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Her pretty face was slightly pale as she stared at Elder Zhong. Saintess Dai. Elder Zhong stood in front of Zhongli Haoyan and blasted his skinny palm toward the Phoenix People's Saintess. Elder Zhong's palm was too terrifying. It surpassed the strength of an early-stage, sky-reaching master. Even if the Phoenix People's Saintess were at her peak, she would not be able to block it. She would probably die on the spot. Not far away, the Phoenix People's second elder naturally saw this scene. He frowned and reminded, Saintess, retreat. The Phoenix People's Saintess was rather calm. She waved her hand and produced a fiery red escape talisman. Crushing the escape talisman, the Saintess of the Phoenix clan turned into an illusory spark and disappeared from where she was. Drifting away, Elder Zhong frowned slightly. His palm had hit nothing. The escape talisman that the Phoenix People's Saintess had produced was very advanced. It turned into an illusory spark, and he could not even catch a trace of its aura. The moment Elder Zhong rescued Zhongli Haoyan and attacked the Phoenix People's Saintess, Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan, who were surrounded by more than 10 aliens, could not hold on any longer. They both vomited mouthfuls of blood and became extremely weak. It's over. Looking at the aliens surrounding them and attacking them, Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing's hearts were filled with despair. They knew that they would not be able to escape this time. There was no doubt that they would die. Deep in the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen saw this scene and sighed softly. He had thought that Elder Zhong would save Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. Unfortunately, he had thought too much. Zhuowen naturally would not watch Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing die in front of him. He took out the Ho-E Divine Bow and a Genesis Divine Arrow and poured a large portion of his energy into it. Chapter 3044. The Merman tribe leader was in a sorry state. Zhuo Wen left a trace of his divine sense in the divine arrow. Soon after, he loosened his grip on the feather. Whoosh! The sound of the arrow tearing through the air rang out as if an earth-shattering bolt of lightning had descended from the heavens. The sound was very sharp and deafening. The divine arrow was too fast and carried with it a strong killing intent. It shot out of the space-time tunnel and headed toward the group of foreign races where Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing were. Puff! 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 The divine arrow pierced through 3 foreign races in an instant. The 3 foreign races didn't even make a sound before they exploded into clouds of blood mist. They couldn't be more dead. After killing the 3 foreign races in an instant, the divine arrow seemed to have a mind of its own as it suddenly turned around and shot toward the other foreign races around it. In just a few breaths' time, 9 foreign races had died to the divine arrow. The remaining 4 or 5 foreign races all looked terrified. They no longer cared about Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing and fled in panic. Unfortunately, the divine arrow didn't show any signs of letting them go. It suddenly turned around and pierced through the remaining foreign races' foreheads in an instant. After killing that foreign being, the divine arrow slowly landed beside Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing. The killing intent around it was completely restrained, and it looked like an ordinary divine arrow of the Genesis stage. This scene was naturally seen by everyone present. However, the majority of the people revealed bewildered expressions because they discovered that the divine arrow that was filled with killing intent had come from an unknown place. It was as if it had appeared out of thin air. Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing were pleasantly surprised. They were all too familiar with the divine arrow and the strong killing intent it carried. Its brother Long, their eyes were filled with surprise. They didn't expect Long Wen to still be alive. Zhongli Haoyan followed beside Elder Zhong. Her beautiful eyes were filled with guilt when she saw that Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were about to die under the foreign race's encirclement. However, when the divine arrow flew through the air, her beautiful eyes revealed a look of joy. However, there was some doubt in her heart. Who exactly was the owner of this divine arrow? Speaking of which, Zhongli Haoyan had only met Zhuowen a few times, and she had only seen Zhuowen fight twice, which was when Zhuowen fought against Moses and the Phoenix people Saintus. In those two battles, Zhuowen didn't use the Hou-Yi sacred bow or the divine arrow. So Zhongli Haoyan didn't know that the divine arrow that was filled with killing intent was Zhuowen's doing. The Saintess of the Phoenix people, who had already flown into the ranks of the foreign races, had a puzzled look in her eyes. At the same time, she was also a little angry that someone had ruined her plans. Her understanding of Zhuowen was about the same as Zhongli and Haoyan, and it was limited to the battle at the sorcerer god's altar. Similarly, she had never seen the trump card of the Hou-Yi divine bow. Although most of the people were puzzled by the sudden appearance of the divine arrow, there was one person in the ranks of the human race whose eyes were shining with a sinister light. This was an old man who looked to be in his 60s. He was wearing a dark red robe, and although his face was wrinkled, his eyes were bright and full of vigor. He had a majestic aura that was difficult to look at. If Zhuowen saw this old man, he would definitely recognize him. This old man was the great elder of the 10 ultimate Yin Corp sect, Gao Yonghong. He was a great expert in the 10 ultimate Yin Corp sect, second only to Senki Yin. The aura of this divine arrow is too similar. Zhuowen must be nearby. Gao Yonghong squinted his eyes and looked around the void. He quickly locked onto a direction. Although he didn't find the exact location of the divine arrow's owner, he had a clear direction. As long as he broke through the void, he would be able to find the exact location of the divine arrow's owner. However, Gao Yonghong was very cautious. He quietly hid in the ranks of the human race and cooperated with them to resist the foreign race. He tried his best not to show any abnormalities in his expression, but his heart was very excited. When Zhuowen had broken into the secret underground chamber of the sect, he had sent Ba Jingwei, Gu Hongkai, and Mao Xinho into the secret underground chamber to kill Zhuowen. Unfortunately, the 3 elders had died in the secret underground chamber. In the end, Zhuowen had shot a terrifying arrow and destroyed the passage to the secret underground chamber. Gao Yonghong had even used all his skills to block that terrifying arrow. The killing intent and aura of this divine arrow that had suddenly appeared from the void was too similar to the arrow that Zhuowen had shot in the secret underground chamber. To be more precise, it was almost exactly the same. Gao Yonghong was very excited. He knew very well that Zhuowen had hidden too many treasures on him. Among them, he knew that the transcending heaven-level divine artifact, the Yama's ghost diagram, had been hidden in the depths of the secret underground chamber by Senki Yin, the sect master of the Yin Corp sect. It had been stolen by Zhuowen. In addition to the Yama's ghost diagram, the terrifying divine arrow that Zhuowen had shot was also a valuable treasure. As long as he could catch Zhuowen, Gao Yonghong knew that he would definitely be rich. In the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen could feel the divine senses that were probing in his direction. He couldn't help but feel a little helpless. The arrow that he had shot was very secretive. It would not be easy for cultivators below the transcending heaven level to detect his location. However, it was impossible for the transcending heaven level experts, who were engaged in a decisive battle, not to mention that their divine senses were extremely powerful. If Zhuowen had done nothing in the space-time tunnel but secretly observed, no one would have detected his existence. However, after he had shot that arrow, he had immediately exposed his location. However, Zhuowen was not worried. The only ones who could pose a threat to him now were the transcending heaven-level experts. As for cultivators below the transcending heaven level, they could not threaten his life at all. After shooting that arrow, Zhuowen did not shoot a second arrow. Instead, he secretly quieted down. Yao Xiangjuan belonged to the Yin and Yang divine sect, while Jiang Qixing was a disciple of the sun-chasing temple. Among the human race, there were still their elders and fellow disciples. After Yao Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing were rescued by the divine arrow, the 2 of them returned to their respective teams under the instructions of the experts of their respective forces. The human race and the alien race, who had stopped fighting because of the arrow, began fighting again. The battle was getting more and more intense, and the casualties on both sides were increasing. Bang! Suddenly there was a loud roar. On the ground, not far away, a figure suddenly broke out of the ground. The place where the figure broke out of the ground was a huge pit. Everyone looked over and found that this person was the merman leader who had been brutally beaten by Elder Jean. At this moment, the merman leader was in a rather sorry state. Her scaly face was slightly pale, and the aura on her body was somewhat weak. She was panting heavily. Chapter 3045. Resolute Elder Jean. Old man, the side effects of the explosive enlightenment pill are very terrifying. Your aura has already begun to weaken. Since you didn't kill me in one breath, just now, you have to die now. The merman leader stomped his right foot and turned into an afterimage as he rushed towards Elder Jean. It had to be said that this merman leader was very sinister. He knew that he was no match for Elder Jean, who had consumed the explosive enlightenment pill. When Elder Jean hurriedly went to save Zhong Li Haoyan, this fellow had been hiding in the huge pit, pretending to be dead, waiting for the effects of the explosive enlightenment pill on Elder Zhong's body to pass. Elder Zhong, be careful. Zhong Li and Haoyan naturally noticed the leader of the merfolk race rushing over and hurriedly warned. Young miss, don't worry. This old man's life is very tough. You rest here first. Also, you must take good care of the possession talisman that the Lord gave you before he left. That thing can protect you during critical moments. After Elder Zhong finished speaking, he stomped his right foot on the air, causing the entire space to tremble violently as he disappeared on the spot. Bang! 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 Immediately, Elder Zhong blocked the incoming merman leader in midair. The two of them engaged in a fierce battle, causing terrifying shockwaves to sweep out. Pucci! The two of them fought for less than an hour before the merman leader seized the opportunity to punch Elder Zhong in the chest. Elder Zhong spat out a mouthful of blood as he continuously retreated in the air. Zhong Li Haoyan cried out in worry. She could clearly see that Elder Zhong's entire body was trembling. His palms were sweating profusely, and the aura on his body had become very chaotic. Zhong Li Haoyan knew that the side effects of the explosive enlightenment pill were beginning to show. She knew very well how great the side effects of the explosive enlightenment pill were. It was already very impressive that Elder Zhong could endure the side effects of the explosive enlightenment pill and persist in fighting the merman leader. The leader of the merfolk race had also suffered heavy injuries, but compared to Elder Zhong, it was not even worth mentioning. Die, you old bastard! The merman leader did not plan to give Elder Zhong a chance to catch his breath. He planned to end the battle quickly. He could tell that Elder Zhong was already an arrow at the end of its flight. This old man had been resisting the backlash from the side effects of the burst enlightenment divine pill, and now that he was severely injured by Yonkai's punch, he might not be able to suppress the backlash that was about to come. There was no fear in Elder Zhong's eyes. He stared coldly at the leader of the mermaids and took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with determination. Waves of blood qi erupted from his body. His blood seemed to be burning at this moment, evaporating into a bloody mist that obscured his vision. Elder Zhong, no. You'll die if you do this. Zhong Li Haoyan's beautiful eyes narrowed as she revealed a sorrowful expression. She knew that Elder Zhong was burning his blood essence. Old man, aren't you afraid of death? When the leader of the mermen saw that Elder Zhong was burning his blood essence, her eyes could not help but shrink. She looked at Elder Zhong as if he was crazy. He was very clear that after using the burst enlightenment divine pill and being heavily injured by him, this old fellow was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Now he was actually burning his blood essence. He really didn't want to live anymore. It's enough to have you accompany me to the grave. Elder Zhong glanced at the leader of the merman race indifferently. Then he turned back to look at Zhong Li Haoyan and sighed. Young miss, this old man has failed to live up to the expectations of the Hall Master. I'm afraid I can't accompany you out of the door of darkness. Zhongli Haoyan was already weeping at this moment. Logically speaking, it was very difficult for an expert of the Master of Heaven to die. With Elder Zhong's current state, if he insisted on leaving this place, the leader of the merman race would not be able to catch up. However, Elder Zhong knew that if he escaped, the battle between the Master of Heaven of the human race and the foreign race would tilt. At that time, the leader of the merman race would definitely join the team of the second elder of the Phoenix people. Right now, Senki-in and the other two were only tied with the second elder of the Phoenix people. They were even at a disadvantage. If he escaped and the leader of the merman race joined in, the three of them would immediately be defeated. Senki-in and the other two would definitely escape, and the human race team would probably be wiped out. Although Elder Zhong was not a saint, he was still a member of the human race. Naturally, he would not do something so treacherous. Fight! Elder Zhong's eyes were filled with battle intent. Blood intent erupted from the top of his head. He was like an unparalleled god of war as he charged toward the leader of the merman race. This lunatic. The leader of the merman race had an ugly expression, but he could only fight. I just have to hold this old man back. The leader of the merman race was very cautious. He did not want to fight Elder Zhong head-on. Instead, he planned to wear Elder Zhong down. After all, Elder Zhong's injuries were too severe. Even if he burned his blood essence, he would not be able to hold on for long. However, the following battle made the leader of the merman race even more upset. This was because Elder Zhong was like a lunatic. He had completely given up on defense. Instead, he attacked the leader of the merman race time and time again without hesitation. The leader of the merman race did not even have time to defend himself. He could only passively receive Elder Zhong's crazy attacks and immediately fell into a disadvantage. As time passed, the leader of the merman race's injuries increased. During this period, he had spat out countless mouthfuls of blood. His face was pale and his aura was getting weaker. His expression was getting worse. There was even fear in his eyes. The old man before him was simply a lunatic. He was attacking without any regard for his life. He knew very well that Elder Zhong's injuries were more severe than his. However, he could not allow this to continue. Even if the old man died before him, he would be half dead by then. Elder Zhong! Zhongli Haoyan saw that Elder Zhong was covered in injuries. His clothes were blood red. They were dyed red by Elder Zhong's blood. Uft! The leader of the merman race spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Elder Zhong, who was charging toward him again, and could not help but shout in fear. "Old man, do you really want to die? Let me tell you, no matter how hard you try, you won't be able to kill me. You'll die in front of me. It doesn't matter. I'll cripple you so that you won't be able to fight. By then, someone will take care of you." Elder Zhong was neither sad nor happy. He continued to attack the leader of the merman race without changing his rhythm. On the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He glanced at Elder Zhong and knew that the old man would not be able to last for more than 10 breaths of time. He was acting so valiantly now. It was obvious that this was the final radiance of the setting sun. Elder Zhong would not be able to kill the leader of the merman race within 10 breaths of time. Zhuowen's eyes became sharp. He flicked his finger and took out a blood-stained horn. He placed it on the bowstring. Then, he pulled the blood-stained horn into a full moon. An unprecedented, terrifying killing intent filled the entire space-time tunnel. Now that Zhuowen's Pangu's sacred body had advanced to the later stage of 6 stars, he could pull the bowstring of the Ho-E Divine bow into a full moon easily. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He released the bowstring. Suddenly, the Ho-E Divine arrow shot out with a thunderous sound. Chapter 3046. Su Long's Death Ho-Ye's godly arrow was extremely fast. It tore through the sky like a bolt of lightning. Wherever the divine arrow passed, space would collapse and the laws would be reversed. The killing intent on the surface of the divine arrow, in particular, seemed to be corporeal. It actually formed a blood-red vortex around the divine arrow. The blood-red whirlpools were densely packed around the arrow. They were like countless bloody mouths that could devour everything around them. 10 breaths' time was very short. Zhuo only spent 5 breaths' time from the moment he drew the bow to the moment he released the Ho Yi's godly arrow to the moment it arrived in front of the merman leader. At that moment, the merman leader was being held back by Elder Zhong and was at a disadvantage. Damn it! Who is it? How dare you shoot an arrow from the dark? When the merman chief sensed the terrifying killing intent from the divine arrow, he felt the fear of death in his heart and could not help but cry out. If Elder Zhong was too exhausted to fight after 10 breaths' time, the merman leader might still be able to avoid the attack of the terrifying Ho Yi's godly arrow. However, he was being suppressed by Elder Zhong too severely. Moreover, the arrow that shot out from an unknown place in the void this time was many times more terrifying than the previous arrow, be it in terms of its power or the accumulated killing intent. Especially when the killing intent locked onto him, he felt goosebumps all over his body. He could feel that even if he was at his peak, he might be severely injured if he took the arrow head-on. If he was hit now, his chances of survival were too slim. Run. I have to run. That was the only thought in the merman leader's mind. Boom! A terrifying blood aura burst out from the merman leader's body. He had burned his blood essence as well. An aura that even surpassed Elder Zhong's came one after another. Old fart, get out of my way. The leader of the merman tribe roared and punched at Elder Zhong. Elder Zhong's expression changed drastically. He realized that the power of the merman leader's punch was far greater than any of his previous attacks. He did not expect the leader of the merfolk race to be able to erupt with such terrifying power after burning her blood essence. However, Elder Zhong was also determined. He knew that he did not have long to live. If he could not eliminate the leader of the merman race, his sacrifice would not be worth mentioning. You are not allowed to do anything. You have to keep the leader of the merfolk here. This was the only thought in Elder Zhong's mind. Elder Zhong desperately burned all the remaining blood essence in his body, and his aura reached an unprecedented height. However, Elder Zhong's body looked extremely tattered. The exposed skin on his face and limbs were even more withered. From afar, he looked like a bag of bones. In the space-time tunnel, Zhuo silently looked at Elder Zhong's miserable state and sighed in his heart. He knew that Elder Zhong was already at the end of his rope. He could only unleash one more attack. After that, Elder Zhong's life would also dissipate. Sulong, this is this old man's final move. You better take it well. Old Zhong's low and deep voice seemed so ethereal. It was like an echo that reverberated in one's ears, sometimes far, sometimes near. Boom! After Elder Zhong finished speaking, he stomped his right foot and disappeared on the spot. He tore through space and charged towards the leader of the merfolk race, Sulong. At this moment, Elder Zhong had abandoned his physical body and life in exchange for the most terrifying destructive power of his final attack. Boom, boom, boom. The moment Elder Zhong and Sulong's fists collided, it was as if countless thunderbolts were raging in the surroundings. Deafening explosions continuously resounded in the surroundings. The moment the loud explosions rang out, an unprecedentedly terrifying wave of air spread out. It was like an ocean in a stormy weather, setting off layer after layer of terrifying waves that were endless and terrifying. Spurt! Elder Zhong and Sulong both spat out large mouthfuls of blood at the same time. Their fists had completely shattered when they collided, and the terrifying shockwaves that spread out even shattered their entire arms to their shoulders. This was only the damage to their bodies. The damage to their spirits was much more serious than the damage to their bodies. Bang! Elder Zhong was heavily smashed into the ground, kneeling on one knee. His left hand was placed on his knee, while his right hand was propped up on the ground. His head was lowered, and he did not move at all. As for Sulong, he fell to the ground in a sorry state, smashing a huge hole in the ground. He spat out another mouthful of blood as he lay on the ground, his entire body trembling. His face was pale, and he was actually gasping for air. No, Su Long's injuries were really too severe. He lay on his back in the huge hole, his entire body twitching. He actually did not have any extra strength to support his body and flee this place. After that, the Ishin arrow had already pierced through the air with peerless killing intent. It was terrifyingly fast, arriving before Su Long in an instant. At this moment in the battlefield, everyone raised their eyelids and looked at the divine arrow that was approaching Su Long. In the alien race team, no one made a move. The others were not stupid. They all deeply felt the peerless killing intent in the Ishin arrow. It was really too terrifying. This kind of terrifying killing intent was not something they could withstand. If they were Empyrean masters, they might have been able to block the arrow for Su Long. Unfortunately, the only Empyrean masters in the foreign race team were Su Long and the two elders of the Phoenix race. The second elder of the Phoenix people naturally saw the scene. Although he had the absolute advantage in the joint forces of Senki-In and the other two, he could not take down the three of them in a short period of time. Naturally, he could not free himself to block this arrow for Su Long Puchi. The sound of an arrow piercing into flesh resounded in this space. The divine arrow finally arrived in front of Su Long. Then, under Su Long's terrified gaze, it completely sank into his chest. An arrow of blood spurted out. Su Long's entire body trembled violently. His eyes were wide open in anger as he stared fixedly at the sky. The divine arrow had sunk into his chest, nailing him to the ground. An invisible ripple spread out in all directions, with Su Long as the center. It was like a raging wave, extremely ferocious. Su Long roared towards the sky, his voice filled with unwillingness and resentment. Before he died, he didn't even know who the murderer was. His death was truly too unjust. Unfortunately, after Su Long roared towards the sky, he lay on the ground with his eyes wide open. However, his life aura gradually dimmed until it was extinguished. The moment Su Long was killed, Zhuowen discovered that the starry sky token on his waist was violently vibrating. Chapter 3047. Terrifying points 1. 053,000 points. Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the size of needles as he stared at the points on the starry sky token in disbelief. He clearly remembered that his points on the starry sky token had only been slightly more than 50,000. In the blink of an eye, the points on the starry sky token had increased by 1 million. This was too exaggerated. Zhuowen quickly realized something. Could it be because he had just killed the merman leader Su Long? Speaking of which, the starry sky token had recognized Zhuowen's cultivation base by default. Although his clone had cultivated the Pangus sacred body and had terrifying strength, it was only a body tempering technique after all. The aura recorded on the starry sky token seemed to be the specific cultivation base aura of the human race. As for the aura of the clone's Pangu sacred body, the starry sky token seemed to be unable to sense it at all. Therefore, Zhuowen's killing of Su Long was equivalent to him crossing a huge gap with his eternal overlord cultivation base and killing a Skirich master expert who stood at the peak of the starry sky. Such an example had probably never happened before in the records of the starry sky contribution ranking, or even among the cultivators of the entire starry sky. After reaching the Skirich master realm, one's means had reached an unfathomable level. All kinds of divine powers and abilities were close to reaching the heavens. It was difficult for a Skirich master expert to kill a Skirich master expert of the same level, let alone an ant like an eternal overlord. Of course, Zhuowen also knew that this was entirely due to his good luck. If Elder Zhong hadn't paid the price with his life to beat Su Long to the brink of death, he probably wouldn't have been able to kill Su Long even if he had used the Ho-E Divine Bow and the Ho-E Divine Arrow to shoot the strongest arrow of his life. Everyone present was stunned. The scene was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's gaze fell on Su Long, who had been firmly nailed to the ground by the divine arrow. There was joy, bewilderment, amazement, and, of course, disbelief in their eyes. The powerful and terrifying leader of the Merfolk clan, Sulong, had actually died. Moreover, he had died to a divine arrow that had shot out of nowhere. Thinking of the archer who had yet to show himself, everyone was shocked. They looked around vigilantly, afraid that another arrow would shoot out of nowhere and take away their lives. On the other hand, the humans were much calmer. This archer had shot out 2 divine arrows, both of which had killed non-humans. Clearly, the owner of this divine arrow was on the side of the human race. Who is it? The Phoenix People's Saintess narrowed her eyes in disbelief as she stared at the white cage nailed to the ground by the divine arrow. At the same time, her consciousness had locked onto a certain direction in front of her. She seemed to see a figure in the depths of the void in that direction. However, the figure soon disappeared. When she wanted to use her divine consciousness to investigate again, she discovered that she could no longer find it. The Phoenix People's Saintess stared in that direction. She knew that the cultivator who had shot the arrow was hiding somewhere in the depths of the void in that direction. It wasn't just the Phoenix People's Saintess. The third step Tao validation powerhouses in the human and non-human teams had also discovered the general direction of Zhuowen's hiding place. As for Zhuowen's specific location, perhaps only a few half-step Ascension Masters and true Ascension Masters would be able to see it. In the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen stomped his right foot and rich space-time power spread from the soles of his feet. Then he quietly left the space-time tunnel and entered another one. At the same time, he evolved the heavenly divination technique to the extreme. The fate aura on his body was completely concealed. However, Zhuowen didn't leave immediately. Instead, he hid in another space-time tunnel near the door of darkness. He was very confident in his heavenly divination technique. However, concealing the fate aura on his body was something that even the Ascension Masters might not necessarily be able to do. Fate was an attribute that only living beings possessed. Inanimate objects didn't possess. Zhuowen used the heavenly divination technique to conceal his fate. In a sense, he was equivalent to an inanimate object. No matter how powerful the Ascension Master's consciousness was, it was unlikely that they would be able to detect an inanimate object in a space-time tunnel deep in the void. Of course, Zhuowen's 2 arrows had already revealed that he was hiding in the space-time tunnel near the door of darkness. As long as the Ascension Masters in this team searched carefully and locked onto this area, they would still be able to find Zhuowen. Zhuowen flicked his fingers. He took the arrow, knocked it, drew it, and released it. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest hesitation. Whoosh! The divine arrow, filled with killing intent, rushed into the ranks of the non-human teams. Although Zhuowen hadn't shot a Ho-E divine arrow this time, it was only a Genesis divine arrow. However, after being strengthened by the Ho-E divine bow, the arrow seemed to have been given a life of its own, turning it into a killing god. Puff! 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 The divine arrow pierced through the ranks of the non-human teams. Every time it pierced through the ranks of the non-human teams, blood would be spilled. Originally, the non-human races had the upper hand in the battle against the human race. However, with the interference of Zhuowen's divine arrow, the non-human teams were thrown into chaos. Zhuowen shot out arrow after arrow. Every arrow was like a meteor crashing into the earth, causing a huge commotion among the non-human teams. After Zhuowen shot out the 10th arrow, the non-humankind army suffered heavy casualties. 30% of them were killed by the divine arrows, while 10% died under the joint attack of the human army. Most of the remaining non-human teams were injured, and their morale was greatly reduced. The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people slapped out her palm. Scorching flames surged out and slapped away a divine arrow that was flying through the air. Her beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent. Bastard! Coward! Do you only know how to shoot arrows from the shadows? The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people shouted angrily into the air. She was going crazy from anger. The non-human teams clearly had the upper hand. If they had been given a little more time, they would have been able to completely crush the human race and wipe out all the humans who had entered the door of darkness. However, she never expected that someone would appear out of nowhere. That person who was hiding in the depths of the void and whom she had never seen before was shooting arrows one after another. Furthermore, that person who hadn't shown himself yet was shooting arrows that were extremely powerful. Little did she know that Lord Tongtian's early-stage divine arrow had pierced through his chest and nailed him to the ground. Both his body and soul had been destroyed. However, that person didn't give up. He continued to shoot arrows, each of which was extremely powerful. In the end, the human race's disadvantage was turned around. Even now, the non-human race's situation was starting to take a turn for the worse. They were being suppressed by the human race to the point of suffocation. I'm coming out. Do you dare to fight me one-on-one? The holy maiden of the Phoenix people originally thought that the person shooting arrows would definitely ignore her and continue to shoot arrows. Chapter 3048. The Reckless MDA. A cowering and hiding fellow. Other than shooting arrows, what true abilities do you have? The Saintess doesn't even need to make a move. MDA can easily get rid of you. Elder MDA of the Merfolk race was not far from the Phoenix people's Saintess. Upon seeing Zhuowen's provocation, this old fellow immediately spoke up, acting like the Saintess' most loyal dog. He stood beside the Saintess with his head held high and his chest puffed out as he spoke, disdainfully. In the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen's lips curled up slightly when he saw MDA of the Merfolk race provoking him. Before entering the door of darkness, MDA had caused him a lot of trouble because of Sauron. If it weren't for Xiaojin's support, MDA would have definitely killed him. The current Zhuowen was no longer the same as before. Before his Pengu's sacred body had broken through, he might not have been MDA's match. However, after entering the door of darkness and obtaining Gongong's goo, as well as the inheritance of Gongong's energy, his Pengu's sacred body had smoothly advanced to 6-star and even directly jumped to late-stage 6-star. His strength had more than doubled. MDA was just an ordinary early-stage Lord of Creation. Although he was stronger than Moses, there was a limit to his strength. In Zhuowen's eyes, MDA was just an ant that was slightly stronger than Moses. Are you sure? Zhuowen's voice came from the void, making it impossible to tell where it came from. MDA raised his head and puffed out his chest as he said proudly, just a guy who hides his head and shows his tail. In my opinion, you're already amazing if you can last 3 moves against me. Zhuowen looked at the puffed-up MDA as if he was looking at an idiot. He really couldn't understand where this guy's confidence came from. He actually looked down on him like this. However, I have a condition. You're not allowed to use that divine arrow you just shot out. You need to fight me openly. Otherwise, I really won't bother to fight you. After saying this, MDA's eyes were very vigilant, and his eyelids were twitching. He guessed that the mysterious human hiding in the depths of the void definitely didn't have a high cultivation, but he had a powerful arrow-type divine weapon. As long as that human doesn't use that strange divine arrow, he won't be a threat to me at all. So that's what this old fellow is planning. Zhuowen scoffed in his heart and opened his mouth once more. Old fellow, your tone isn't small. I promise you that I won't use that divine arrow. As he spoke, Zhuowen's right foot gently stepped out in the air. Immediately after, intense ripples spread out from under his feet, and his figure gradually disappeared into the void. And MDA's MDA was MDA was MDA Studio of NDA. MDA grunted and hurriedly retreated until he was around the merman leader, Su Cage. Suddenly, an aura that made people tremble appeared above MDA's head. Shortly after, the space above him shattered. MDA, 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 MDA raised his head. His eyes were filled with fear. He saw a huge palm in the shattered space above him. The palm was sparkling and translucent. It emitted a glass-like radiance. It didn't look like a real palm. Instead, it looked like an exquisitely carved jade bracelet. MDA, 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 MDA regretted it. If he knew that the person who shot the arrow was so terrifying, he wouldn't have stood up for the saintess of the Phoenix people and provoked such a ruthless person. The saintess of the Phoenix clan was shocked. She looked at the crystal palm that was pressing down in disbelief. Her pretty face was deathly pale, without the slightest trace of blood, because she felt a familiar and terrifying aura from the palm. It can't be. That guy should be dead. But this aura and attack method are too similar. The saintess of the Phoenix people muttered to herself. Her face was unsightly. She must have recalled some bad memories. As for all the cultivators who doubted the person who shot the arrow, they were all shocked. Only now did they realize that they had indeed underestimated this person. Not only did this fellow know how to shoot arrows from the back, but he could also face them head-on. He was an all-rounder. MDA cried out in alarm. He unleashed all of his abilities, exploding forth with all of his methods, stimulating 100%, no, it should be 200% of his potential. All the foreign races looked at MDA, their eyes filled with hope. They all cheered loudly for MDA, hoping that MDA would be able to defeat this mountain-like palm. After MDA screamed, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, he ran away like a wisp of smoke. It was very straightforward, as if he had been planning this for a long time. In the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen sneered repeatedly. Looking at MDA, who had turned around to flee, he said indifferently, "Can you escape?" Rumble. Just as the incomparably huge palm was about to hit the ground, it suddenly changed direction and chased after the fleeing MDA. Although MDA had unleashed all of his abilities, the gap between him and Zhuowen was too great. Before he could escape far, he was caught up by the sparkling and translucent palm. After MDA screamed, he could no longer make any sound, because he had already been smashed into powder by the palm. His divine soul and physical body had collapsed. All traces of him in this world had been annihilated by that unparalleled palm at this moment. Dang, dang, dang. After MDA was smashed into powder by the palm, the whole place became much quieter. But soon, it was broken by light footsteps. Everyone's gazes gathered in the direction of the footsteps. That was where Su Long's corpse was. At this moment, Su Long's eyes were still wide open. He looked at the sky as if lamenting the unfairness of the heavens. Beside Su Long's corpse, a young man was strolling leisurely. It was as if he was leisurely strolling in his own courtyard. This young man had extremely fair cheeks, red lips, and white teeth. If this young man were to wear women's clothes, no one would be able to recognize him as a man. However, the Phoenix People Saintess and many cultivators with high cultivation could tell at a glance that this person was in disguise. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan's eyes flashed. They knew that this young man in disguise was most likely Longwen, who they thought was dead. Although they couldn't recognize Zhuowen's real face under his disguise, this person's divine arrow had exposed his identity. The Phoenix People's Saintess' eyelids twitched. She stared at the handsome young man, her beautiful eyes full of fear. Zhuo slowly walked in front of Su Long's corpse. With a curl of his right index finger under everyone's gazes, the Hou-Yi divine arrow that was embedded in Su Long's chest was pulled out and automatically entered Zhuowen's palm. After Zhuowen put away the Hou-Yi divine arrow, he ignored the Phoenix People Saintess, who was cautiously not far away. Instead, he slowly walked to Elder Zhong, who was kneeling on one knee with his head lowered. At this moment, Zhongli Haoyan was kneeling in front of Elder Zhong. Her face was covered in tears, and the sorrow in her beautiful eyes couldn't be concealed for a long time. "Miss Zhongli, I'm sorry. I didn't have time to save him," Chapter 3049. Appear Zhongli Hao Yan looked up blankly. She glanced at Zhuowen, and the confusion in her eyes cleared up a little. Zhuowen knew that Zhongli Hao Yan had already guessed his identity. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to look at him so clearly. Brother Long, you don't have to apologize. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been able to avenge Elder Zhong. I should be the one thanking you. However, you have to be careful of the Phoenix People Saintess. She should have recognized you. Zhongli Hao Yan's voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen knew that she was the one who had sent him a voice transmission. Zhuowen nodded and looked at the Phoenix People Saintess, who was standing not too far away. The corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. The moment he had made his move, he knew that the Phoenix People Saintess would have sensed it. However, he didn't care. The Phoenix People Saintess was indeed very strong, especially after she had awakened her bloodline. She was much stronger than MDA, but there was still a big gap between her and Zhuowen. Right now, Zhuowen was planning to capture the Phoenix People Saintess and find out about Mu Qinshue's whereabouts. Although the Phoenix People Saintess looked almost the same as Mu Qinshuo, Zhuowen knew that the former wasn't Mu Qinshuo at all. She was a completely different person. At that moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Zhuowen. Their expressions were surprisingly similar. They were shocked, puzzled, and in disbelief. This was because the aura of this handsome young man who had appeared out of nowhere was actually only at the Eternal Overlord Realm. The Eternal Overlord Realm was the last realm of the second step of the Tao validation stage. This person was quite young, so his talent was pretty good if he could cultivate to the Eternal Overlord Realm. However, this person had actually killed the early stage creation, Lord MDA, with a flip of his hand. This was too unbelievable. The Creation Lord realm was the second realm of the third step of the Tao validation stage, which was 2 major realms higher than the Eternal Overlord realm. Logically speaking, a Creation Lord realm cultivator could crush an Eternal Overlord realm as easily as crushing an ant. However, the situation seemed to be reversed now. The Eternal Lord Youth who had suddenly appeared had become the person who could crush an ant, while the initial stage creation, Lord Morda, had become an ant. This kind of nondescript result had a huge impact on everyone. It even subverted their worldview. Who is this person? The aura is really familiar. Sun, Qi, and Yin, who were entangled with the 2 elders of the Phoenix clan, naturally noticed Zhuowen. The 3 of them exchanged glances with each other, their eyes filled with confusion. They felt that the young man's aura was very familiar, but they couldn't remember who he was. On the other hand, Gao Yanghong, the Grand Elder of the Incorp sect, was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. He looked at Zhuowen's back with fear. Although he had recognized Zhuowen's identity before, he did not expect that this person's strength had actually become so terrifying. Morda, who was at the initial stage creation Lord realm, had actually been easily destroyed by this fellow. Although Gao Yanghong's cultivation was much higher than Morda's, and he had already reached the level of a half-step skybound master, he felt that given his current strength, he could at most fight to a draw with Zhuowen. Perhaps he could even gain the upper hand. However, Gao Yanghong knew that he could not completely crush this person at the moment unless he became a skybound master. As he thought about this, Gao Yanghong glanced at Senki Yin, who was arguing with the Phoenix people in the distance. He wondered if he should inform Senki Yin of Zhuowen's identity. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan wanted to walk toward Zhuowen, but were quickly stopped by Zhuowen's voice transmission. Brother Jiang, junior sister Yao, try not to acknowledge me now. I have a lot of enemies now. If you acknowledge me, I'm afraid you will be implicated. Just pretend that you don't know me. Zhuowen's voice lingered in their minds, stopping them from taking a step forward. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They silently glanced at Zhuowen's back and no longer moved forward. What Zhuowen said was right. The 2 of them were too weak. If they went over to acknowledge Zhuowen now, it was inevitable that they would be targeted. Although they had their own factions supporting them, Zhuowen had offended a lot of people. Yi Hanfei of the Yin and Yang divine sect had been killed by Zhuowen. After that, he had killed many powerful foreign race geniuses and offended the Phoenix people. Could it be that if they acknowledged Zhuowen, the powers behind them would help Zhuowen? This was obviously impossible. The two of them felt helpless. They transmitted their voices to Zhuowen, telling him to be careful, and retreated to their respective groups. At the same time, the two of them were also curious about how Longwen had been resurrected and how he had left the door of darkness earlier than them. They didn't know what method Longwen had used. Zhuowen ignored the surrounding gazes and looked at the Phoenix People Saintess. He said indifferently, "Saintess, do you dare to fight me one-on-one?" As soon as these words came out, many people's gazes fell on the Phoenix People Saintess. Then they turned back to Zhuowen with strange gazes. Everyone knew that the Phoenix People Saintess was a famous, monstrous genius in the primitive heaven realm. She had the 99 Phoenix body and possessed monstrous strength. Many experts of the older generation weren't necessarily a match for the Phoenix People Saintess, although the Phoenix People Saintess cultivation was lower than Muda's. They knew that the Phoenix People Saintess was much stronger than Mu, to killing Mu wouldn't take too much effort. In everyone's eyes, the strength of the Phoenix People Saintess should be second only to the two Skirich masters in the foreign race group. Although the sudden appearance of this human youth had shocked everyone, it wasn't enough. Therefore, when this person proposed to fight the Phoenix People Saintess, everyone sneered. They felt that this person was masochistic. He actually dared to challenge the Phoenix People Saintess. This is ridiculous. How dare you threaten to fight the Saintess one-on-one? You're not qualified. That's right. Who do you think you are? You're just a despicable human. How dare you challenge the Saintess? The Saintess won't accept the challenge of a despicable human like you. Even if she did, she could kill you with a slap. However, that would dirty her hands. Everyone in the foreign race group looked at Zhuowen unkindly. Some of them even belittled Zhuowen. Zhuowen completely ignored these taunts. Instead, he looked indifferently at the Phoenix People Saintess. Killing intent flashed in his eyes as he continued. The dignified Saintess doesn't even have the courage to accept my challenge. The beautiful eyes of the Phoenix People's Saintess flickered as she looked at Zhuowen. Her eyes were full of fear. After she guessed that this person was Longwen, she had already wanted to retreat. One had to know that she had fought Zhuowen on the sorcerer god's altar in the Door of Darkness. She knew how terrifying and powerful the latter was. If this guy hadn't been distracted during that battle, she would have been in danger. She might even have died.